Beneath the surface of every familiar story lies a hidden doorway, an unmarked trail that vanishes into the shadows of history. What if the textbooks we trust have merely skimmed the edges of truth? Imagine stumbling upon a cryptic map etched into a crumbling cathedral wall, or unearthing a fragment of parchment that whispers of a vanished civilization. These are not mere curiosities. They are invitations to step off the beaten path and chase the echoes of human mystery. Picture a dimly lit archive where the dust settles like 100 forgotten secrets, each volume hiding riddles that defy explanation. Consider the ruins of an ancient fortress perched on a windswept cliff, its stone corridors humming with unanswered questions. Who carved those symbols, and why did they vanish without a trace? Tonight, we'll venture deep into these rabbit holes, peeling back layers of time to confront the enigmas that refuse to be solved. No guidebook can prepare you for what awaits, so sit back, relax, and let's dive in. The late afternoon sun casts long, honeyed beams across a landscape of shifting sand and scattered stone. Imagine standing at the edge of the ancient city of Alexandria, where the Mediterranean breeze carries the faint scent of salt and paper, if paper could survive for millennia, that is. Here, on this narrow spit of land stretching toward the horizon, once stood the grandest repository of human thought, the Library of Alexandria. Marble columns, now reduced to broken fragments, once framed vast halls lined with papyrus scrolls. Can you feel the weight of those silent corridors, where scholars traced their fingertips along gleaming shelves, each scroll whispering of distant worlds and untold discoveries? Founded in the early 3rd century BC under the guidance of Ptolemy III Soter, the library was more than a collection of texts. It was a living experiment in human curiosity. Ambassadors from Greece, Persia, and the farthest reaches of India presented their greatest works in exchange for access to its treasures. By some accounts, it housed as many as 400,000 scrolls, each meticulously catalogued by a cadre of librarians who were scholars in their own right. Imagine the hush of that vast reading room, where the light flickered off inked letters that ranged from mathematical treatises to epic poems, from medical observations to philosophical dialogues. Yet as we step closer, the certainties begin to blur. How, for example, did this beacon of knowledge succumb to the flames of history? The mainstream narrative speaks of accidental fires, Julius Caesar's campaign in 48 BC, a stray torch setting ablaze the adjacent docks and consuming a portion of the collection. Later, whispers suggest that the decree of a later Roman emperor, Theophilus, led to the destruction of pagan temples and perhaps more scrolls in the 4th century AD. But these explanations leave gaps. What of the sections said to contain the private annotations of Aristotle or the original works of Archimedes? Did they vanish in a single conflagration, or were they systematically dispersed, traded, or even buried for safekeeping? Some accounts hint at a darker fate, that scrolls deemed heretical by later rulers were deliberately purged, thrown into the sea, or reduced to ash. Others propose that zealous mobs, misled by religious fervor, destroyed entire wings of the library in acts of iconoclasm. Yet archaeological surveys beneath the sands of modern Alexandria have uncovered little definitive proof of such cataclysms. Could it be that a significant portion of the collection slipped quietly away, repurposed by scholars across the ancient world? As you wander further into this mystery, you encounter tantalizing fragments, a single papyrus preserved in the cooler, drier climate of an oasis, a citation in a medieval Arabic manuscript pointing to a lost commentary on Euclid, a damaged volume discovered in the ruins of a fortress near Palestine, its edges charred, yet the script remarkably intact. Each fragment raises more questions than it answers. How many scrolls survived, only to be hidden away in private collections? Which works, lost to time, might have reshaped our understanding of science, philosophy, or mathematics? Then there are the whispers of hidden chambers, underground vaults beneath the royal quarter, sealed by shifting earth and forgotten by even the most diligent explorers. Could entire archives lie entombed beneath layers of sediment, awaiting rediscovery? Some historians point to ancient maps that mark entrances to subterranean galleries, but these maps contradict one another, suggesting that if such vaults exist, they may have been sealed deliberately, their keys scattered to the winds. Speculative theories take us even further down the rabbit hole. Did any of the library's scholars attempt to duplicate their collection, sending copies to distant outposts in Athens or Constantinople? Were there secret scripts, coded in unknown languages, that recorded esoteric knowledge now erased from collective memory? And what of the legendary Museion, the associated institution that housed not only scrolls, but also an early research academy? Its ruins lie under modern neighborhoods. Could its foundations conceal a trove of inscriptions waiting to be deciphered? Yet, as we entertain these possibilities, we must tread carefully. The allure of mystery can lead us away from verifiable evidence, chasing shadows through layers of myth and supposition. We know for certain that the Library of Alexandria represented an unprecedented union of scholarship and statecraft, that its ambition was global and its loss universal. We can piece together fragments of its history from the works of Strabo, Plutarch, and the Islamic scholars who preserved echoes of its glory. But beyond those fragments, much remains obscured by the passage of time. What remains clear is the enduring power of the library's ideal, that knowledge, once gathered and shared, becomes the common heritage of humanity. The questions hover in the desert air. What truths slipped through the cracks of history? Which manuscripts linger in dusty alcoves, misfiled or overlooked? And could modern technology, ground-penetrating radar, multispectral imaging, digital reconstruction, help us recover what was once thought irretrievable? The Library of Alexandria may no longer stand in marble and papyrus, but its spirit persists in every quest to illuminate the past. As we stand on the shores of that ancient harbor, we confront the paradox of knowledge, that the more we uncover, the more we realize how much remains hidden. So we listen to the silence of broken columns, we search for the faintest echo of scribbled ink, and we ask ourselves, what secrets still lie buried beneath the sands, waiting for the next curious mind to awaken them? As the last echoes of parchment being unrolled fade into the desert wind, our journey turns from the halls of shattered libraries to the silent stones that guard a far more personal secret, the final resting place of Alexander the Great. Imagine standing in the early morning light on the edge of the ancient city of Alexandria, where a lone sarcophagus, its surface worn and obscured by centuries of sand, hovers between legend and reality. Around it, fragments of colonnades jut from the earth like broken teeth, and the sea beyond shimmers in the distance, a silent witness to the grand ambitions that once shaped the known world. Founded by the young conqueror himself in 331 BC, Alexandria was designed to immortalize his name. Within its heart, his body lay in state, first in Memphis, then carried north to this favored city by generations of successors who understood the power of myth. Contemporary historians like Diodorus tell us that, upon Alexander's death in 323 BC, his generals quarreled over the spoils of his empire, yet agreed unanimously on one thing: his tomb must stand as a symbol of unity. But where exactly was it placed, and what became of it when the tides of empire shifted? The mainstream account suggests that Alexander's mausoleum was constructed on the royal quay, beside the grand temple of Serapis. Ancient coins and texts describe a temple-like monument, its walls adorned with torches kept perpetually alight. Pilgrims came from as far as India to pay homage, bearing gifts of exotic spices and silks. Yet by the 4th century AD, references to the tomb grow scarce. Did it fall victim to decay, or was it deliberately dismantled when new rulers sought to stamp their own authority on the city? Archaeological surveys along the Kate Bay promontory, erected in the 15th century atop the ruins of the ancient pharaoh's lighthouse, have uncovered foundations that some scholars tentatively link to Alexander's shrine. Beneath layers of medieval masonry, they've found carved blocks bearing Greek inscriptions, but the evidence remains fragmentary. Could these stones once have formed the base of a grand cenotaph? Or were they repurposed building materials, plundered long after the emperor's legend had outlived his empire? Moving inland, whispers lead us to the royal quarter, where streets lined with modern homes hide seams in the earth. Satellite imagery has revealed anomalies, rectangular voids beneath the surface, suggestive of large chambers. Local lore speaks of secret tunnels, perhaps intended to hide the tomb from marauding invaders. But when exploration teams have descended into these shafts, they've found only rubble and collapsed corridors. Did early explorers miss a side chamber that holds the true sarcophagus, or has time swallowed the most vital clues? Then there are the murkier tales passed down through medieval manuscripts. One Arabic text describes a golden coffin discovered by Coptic monks in the 5th century, later reburied to protect it from desecration. Another account, attributed to Crusader pilgrims, speaks of a guardian order that hid Alexander's remains somewhere inland, possibly in the hills of what is now northern Palestine. According to this version, the body was moved to a mountaintop shrine, where, under the cover of night, it was interred in a cavern veiled by draped tapestries and lit by oil lamps fueled with sacred frankincense. These more speculative threads strain against the boundaries of certainty. No credible excavation in Palestine has unearthed a Greco-Macedonian tomb of sufficient grandeur. Yet the sheer volume of conflicting reports forces us to confront the possibility that Alexander's sarcophagus became more than a mausoleum. It became a myth, carried by word of mouth across kingdoms. Did the early Arab historians conflate the futures of Alexander and local prophets, weaving his story into religious lore? Or did treasure seekers, intent on plunder, scatter the relics and cover their tracks in shadow? One of the most tantalizing clues comes from a medieval itinerary preserved in a Byzantine archive. It lists a series of way stops from Alexandria to Babylon, each marked by a monument bearing the visage of a sleeping king. Some researchers interpret this as evidence that Alexander's mummy, or at least a cenotaph representing him, was transported eastward during the Roman period. Could his remains have ended up in a hallowed chamber beneath the ruins of Seleucia on the Tigris, only to vanish again when the city fell in the 3rd century AD? Modern technology offers new hope. Ground-penetrating radar surveys around ancient Alexandria continue to reveal hollow spaces where none should exist. Multispectral imaging on weathered mosaics hints at outlines of royal insignia, half erased by time. And yet, every promising lead seems to dissolve under closer scrutiny. The tomb remains elusive, a void in the map of history as profound as the sarcophagus itself. What remains undeniable is the enduring power of Alexander's legacy. His tomb, wherever it lies, is more than a burial site. It is a symbol of the untamable human desire to transcend mortal limits. It inspires explorers to sift through layers of civilization, to question every fragment of stone, every stray inscription. And it reminds us that sometimes the greatest discoveries come not from what we find, but from the mysteries that continue to haunt our imaginations. So we stand once more at the threshold of legend and fact, peering into the darkness beneath the ground. What secret corridors lie waiting to be revealed? Which discarded block of marble carries the final imprint of his name? And perhaps most haunting of all, could the tomb of the man who once claimed the known world still lie hidden, its location lost to time and the shifting sands of history? As the dust of shifting sands settles on the stone horizon, we leave behind the echoes of royal tombs to step into a world even older, where time itself seems to pause. Rising from the gentle contours of a windswept plateau in southeastern Turkey, Göbekli Tepe emerges like a mirage of living rock. Enormous T-shaped pillars, some reaching over 5 meters high, stand in silent concentric rings, their weathered surfaces etched with reliefs of foxes, vultures, and abstract symbols. Here, amid the scrub and the wild grasses, the light of dawn spills across limestone slabs, illuminating carvings that predate the wheel, the plow, and even settled agriculture. Unearthed only in the 1990s by Klaus Schmidt and his team, this site challenged every assumption we held about prehistoric societies. Carbon-14 dating places its construction around 9600 BC, an era when hunter-gatherers roamed the landscape in small, mobile bands. Yet at Göbekli Tepe, they undertook monumental efforts, quarrying massive pillars, transporting them across uneven terrain, and carving them with astonishing precision. What drove these nomadic communities to commit such labor to a hilltop sanctuary? Was it a shared ritual space, a neutral ground where groups gathered to forge alliances? Or did it serve as a celestial calendar, its pillars locking into patterns of stars and seasons? Mainstream archaeology proposes that Göbekli Tepe was a ceremonial center, predating stone circles like Stonehenge by millennia. Excavators have uncovered flint debris from butchering rituals, suggesting feasts where hundreds may have assembled. Animal bones, wild boar, gazelle, even aurochs, lie scattered at the base of pillars, hinting at sacrificial offerings. Yet no living quarters or storage pits have been found nearby. How could a site of such scale sustain repeated gatherings without a permanent settlement? Could the people have migrated here seasonally, their camps long since succumbed to erosion and time? As we peer deeper, puzzling details emerge. The pillars bear enigmatic carvings, cranes with outstretched necks, serpentine motifs curling around stelae, humanoid forms with arms outlined in relief. Were these mere decorative flourishes, or did they encode a protoscript, a system of symbols that communicated beliefs, genealogies, or astronomical events? Some researchers argue that the layout aligns with the rising and setting of constellations, suggesting an advanced understanding of the heavens. Yet the precision seems almost uncanny for a culture we assumed lacked permanent architecture. How did they measure angles, carve stone, and coordinate labor without the tools and social structures we usually associate with such achievements? Venturing into the realm of speculation, a host of fringe theories beckon with their own allure. Could Göbekli Tepe be the last vestige of a lost Ice Age civilization, wiped out by climatic upheaval, its legends preserved only in these silent stones? Some propose that the pillars are the remnants of an astronomical observatory, tracking the movements of Sirius, or even celestial bodies unknown to modern science. Others suggest an unbroken oral tradition that imbued each symbol with layers of meaning, now irretrievable after 10,000 years. And then there are those who whisper of portals, gateways to alternate realms, suggested by the uncanny symmetry of certain enclosures. While such ideas stretch the limits of evidence, they underscore our instinct to seek deeper connections in a place so profoundly ancient. Yet for every hypothesis, concrete puzzles remain. Why was Göbekli Tepe deliberately buried under tons of rubble around 8000 BC, only to be forgotten until recent times? Did the advent of agriculture render its ceremonial purpose obsolete, leading its caretakers to seal it away as they built new ways of life? And what of the surrounding landscape? Smaller enclosures, satellite shrines, carved rock faces partially revealed by erosion? Each discovery raises fresh questions. Are we witnessing a single monumental project or the centerpiece of a vast network of sacred sites stretching across the Fertile Crescent? Today, advanced technologies offer new glimpses beneath the surface. Ground-penetrating radar surveys map subsurface anomalies. Digital photogrammetry reconstructs worn carvings. Geochemical analysis traces the origin of limestone blocks. Yet with every answer, the mystery deepens. We find footprints of rituals but lack the names of those who carried them out. We trace the outlines of feasts, but cannot taste the spices that seasoned their meals. We chart star paths but cannot hear the chants that once echoed beneath the pillars. As the sun dips low and the shadows lengthen across Göbekli Tepe's silent rings, we are reminded that history is not a closed book, but an ever-unfolding tapestry. The story of these ancient stones is woven with threads of human ingenuity, collective belief, and unanswered questions. What compelled our distant ancestors to erect such a place, then bury it so thoroughly? Which secrets lie still entombed beneath layers of soil and centuries of neglect? And perhaps most hauntingly of all, what will it take for us to bridge the chasm of time and hear once more the voices that called this hilltop home? As the wind-whispered stones of Göbekli Tepe fade from view, we turn our gaze from the silent monuments of prehistory to an enigma bound in leather and ink, a manuscript that defies every attempt to unravel its secrets. Open the cover of the Voynich Manuscript, and you are met with pages of creamy vellum, each one bathed in muted hues of green and ochre. Strange plants wind their way across the margins, rendered in angles so unfamiliar they seem to belong to another world. Pools of blue and red ink form cosmic diagrams, concentric circles inscribed with looping characters that appear no less alien today than they did 5 centuries ago. Radiocarbon dating places the creation of these folios in the early 15th century, likely somewhere in Central Europe. Yet when Wilfrid Voynich acquired the book in 1912, its origins were already obscured by time. What we do know is that each page bears an uncanny consistency, a single, unbroken script that flows with the grace of a practiced hand, but which stubbornly refuses to match any known language. Who penned these words, and to what purpose? Scholars have pored over the text for a century, employing statistical analyses, pattern recognition software, and even artificial intelligence, only to confirm what cryptographers have long suspected. The Voynich script resists every conventional cipher. The manuscript unfolds in distinct sections. The first bursts with botanical drawings, leaves laced with veins that divide like tributaries, flowers with petals curled into impossible shapes. Are these the sketches of an herbalist cataloging plants that cannot be found in any modern taxonomy? Or might they be allegorical, representing medicines of the mind rather than remedies of the body? Turning the page, we find astronomical diagrams, zodiacal charts dotted with stars, each constellation encircled by cryptic labels. Do these skies reflect medieval astrology or hint at a personal cosmology unknown to mainstream thinkers of the era? Moving deeper, dozens of folios depict human figures, women bathing in tubs fed by elaborate plumbing, sometimes connected to pipes that resemble roots or vines. What ritual did these communal baths serve? Were they purifying ceremonies, medical treatments, or symbolic enactments of some alchemical process? Marginal notes in faded ink, likely later annotations, glimpse at attempts to categorize the manuscript, but they add only to the mystery, as if each new voice found itself adrift in the same labyrinth. Mainstream scholarship offers cautious theories. Some posit that the book is a pharmacopoeia, a compendium of herbal lore encoded to guard trade secrets. Others suggest it might be the work of a medieval polymath, blending natural philosophy with mystical traditions. A few even argue it could be a hoax, a deliberately crafted puzzle designed to gull would-be collectors. Yet none of these explanations accounts for the manuscript's internal coherence. Statistical analyses reveal that its language follows Zipf's law, the same distribution pattern found in natural languages, an anomaly hard to reconcile with the notion of random gibberish. As we consider those possibilities, we cannot ignore the more speculative edges. Could the Voynich text preserve the vestiges of a lost language, spoken by a vanished sect or cult? Some enthusiasts claim that the plant images correspond to species native to the Americas, centuries before Columbus, suggesting pre-Columbian transatlantic contact. Others whisper of steganographic techniques so advanced they remain beyond modern cryptanalysis, implying that the manuscript's creator anticipated the tools of 21st century codebreakers. Then there are the theories that brush against the extraordinary. A handful of researchers have proposed that the Voynich manuscript encodes the experiences of altered states, visions induced by psychoactive compounds seared onto vellum in a trance. Could the swirling patterns be the mind maps of a mystic, charting inner landscapes rather than external realities? Or, more fringe still, have some speculated that the book is not of human origin at all, but rather a transcription of knowledge received from non-human intelligences preserved in a format we have yet to comprehend. No matter how daring the theory, the evidence remains elusive. High-resolution imaging has revealed erased erasures, hidden sketches beneath the visible layers, proof that the manuscript was edited, revised, perhaps even censored. Multispectral scans have uncovered faint marginalia, names and dates that hint at a chain of ownership traversing European courts, yet the core text stays resolutely opaque. Each new revelation seems to deepen the puzzle, a botanical plate redrawn, a star chart tweaked, a marginal note added, but never a definitive key that unlocks the script itself. Why would someone invest such effort in a work that seems destined never to be read? Was the act of creation more important than the act of comprehension, a kind of secret devotion, committed to parchment in hopes that future generations might one day decipher its truths? Or did the manuscript serve a practical purpose in its own time, meaningful to a small circle of initiates, then abandoned when those initiates passed away? As the candlelight dances across these vellum pages, we confront the paradox of the Voynich manuscript, a book so meticulously crafted and yet so comprehensively unreadable. It embodies the tension between human ingenuity and the limits of our understanding, a reminder that even in an age of unprecedented knowledge, there remain corners of the past shrouded in impenetrable darkness. And so we close this chapter, our fingers brushing the edge of a mystery that has long outlived its own era. What secrets lie encoded in those looping glyphs? Which of the plants sketched in emerald and ochre might still be waiting to be matched with their real-world counterparts? And will there ever come a day when the Voynich manuscript, that silent partner in our quest for meaning, finally whispers its story to the world? As the last echoes of vellum and ink drift from our fingertips, we turn our gaze from the inscrutable pages of the Voynich manuscript to a mechanism ensnared by the sea itself, a device so intricate that it reads like a technological dream from antiquity. Imagine the Mediterranean tides washing over a granite seabed just off the coast of the tiny Greek isle of Antikythera. There, at a depth of nearly 60 meters, lies the remains of a Roman-era shipwreck, its cargo now scattered like bones around a silent tomb. Among the shattered amphorae and encrusted bronze statues, sponge divers first glimpsed the glint of bronze gears, an object that would rewrite our understanding of ancient engineering. Raised to the surface in 1901, the fragments of the Antikythera Mechanism appeared at first as nothing more than corroded lumps. Yet even in that initial moment, the device hinted at something extraordinary. Subsequent X-rays revealed a cascade of interlocking gears, more than 30 in total, arranged within a wooden frame roughly the size of a shoebox. Each cog, cut with astonishing precision, bore teeth whose uniformity would not be rivaled again until the Industrial Revolution. How did artisans of the 1st century BC achieve such mechanical sophistication, with tools that were thought too primitive for this level of craftsmanship? Mainstream scholarship now recognizes the Antikythera Mechanism as the world's earliest known analog computer. Its primary function, it seems, was to predict celestial movements, the phases of the moon, the annual course of the sun, and even the irregular orbit of the moon itself, producing the so-called lunar anomaly. On its front dial, 2 concentric scales traced the zodiac and the Egyptian calendar, while a smaller dial on the back charted the 4-year cycle of the Olympiad, counting down to the next games. Inscriptions on the mechanism's fragments provided instructions for its operation, as if its creators intended the device to be read and understood, not simply admired. Yet, as we trace the outlines of these gears, questions multiply. Why did this level of astronomical precision vanish for over a millennium? No comparable device appears in the records of medieval Europe or the Islamic world. Did the knowledge slip away when the workshop that produced it was lost to war or neglect? Or was the mechanism an extraordinary one-off, a prodigy of invention whose secrets were jealously guarded and then buried by time? As we peer deeper, the mechanism's story grows more enigmatic. Some historians have pointed to contemporaneous descriptions of devices by Archimedes and Hipparchus, suggesting that Hellenistic scholars may have experimented with geared instruments. Could the Antikythera Mechanism be the culmination of a line of technological inquiry that began in the libraries of Alexandria? Or did it emerge from a lesser-known workshop on Rhodes or Corinth, its origins erased by the anonymity of ancient records? Speculative theories venture further into the unknown. A handful of voices suggest that the mechanism embodies lost philosophical traditions, schools of thought that blended mathematics, astrology, and mechanical craft into a unified vision of the cosmos. These traditions, they argue, were suppressed by political or religious authorities uncomfortable with the device's implication that the heavens operated according to predictable laws. Others flirt with more radical ideas, that the device reflects knowledge transmitted from civilizations predating classical Greece, perhaps even carried eastward along Silk Road routes. While such notions lack firm evidence, they underscore the mechanism's power to ignite the imagination. Modern technology has peeled back more layers of the mechanism's mystery. Enhanced imaging techniques, multispectral scans, and 3D X-ray tomography have revealed inscriptions hidden beneath centuries of corrosion. These texts reference further gearing that once tracked the cycles of Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars, hinting at a planetary display that has long since vanished. How many of those gears remain entombed within the wreck? And might future dives recover additional fragments, enabling us to reconstruct the full celestial tableau that its makers envisioned? Even the mechanism's underwater graveyard raises fresh puzzles. The 1901 excavation was hurried and tragic. Several divers succumbed to the bends, and many artifacts were lost or damaged in the pull of the currents. Recent expeditions have returned to the site with advanced submersibles and remotely operated vehicles, mapping the seafloor with centimeter-level precision. Yet each new traverse of the wreck site seems to reveal fewer objects than expected. Has looting occurred over the centuries, or did shifting currents bury portions of the cargo beneath layers of sediment awaiting rediscovery? As we chart these possibilities, we confront a deeper tension at the heart of the Antikythera Mechanism. It is both monument and cipher. Each gear speaks of human ingenuity across 2 millennia, yet each missing piece reminds us of how much can slip through history's sieve. The device stands as proof that our ancestors pursued scientific understanding with a zeal equal to our own, while also exposing the fragility of that knowledge when left unrecorded or undervalued. Now, as we allow the image of that corroded bronze box to linger in our minds, we must ask, what other innovations lie hidden beneath the waves of history? How many ancient workshops once hummed with the promise of discovery, their legacies swallowed by neglect or disaster? And could the Antikythera Mechanism be but one fragment of a vast network of mechanical thought, waiting for patient explorers and scholars to piece together a narrative long fractured by time? In the silent aftermath of these questions, the mechanism's riddle endures. Its gears remain bound in bronze and mystery, turning on an axis of human curiosity. And so, as we prepare to plunge further down the rabbit hole of history's most profound enigmas, we leave the Antikythera Mechanism to its own silent orbit, its secrets still waiting to be unlocked. As the ghostly gears of the Antikythera Mechanism fade into the depths of forgotten knowledge, our journey now leads us northward, to the windswept frontiers of the Roman Empire and the vanished fate of its 9th Legion. Imagine standing in the chill dawn mist on the ramparts of an abandoned fort near Hadrian's Wall, where crumbling stone walls huddle against the edge of the unknown. Here, the hollow wind seems to carry distant echoes of marching boots, and the ground still bears the faint impressions of timber barracks long since reclaimed by heather and peat. Legio 9. Hispana was forged in the fires of civil war, its standards first raised by Julius Caesar's legate, Sertorius, in the middle of the 1st century BC. Later, under Augustus, the legion earned its Hispanic cognomen in campaigns across the Iberian hills. By AD 43, it had crossed the Channel with Claudius's invasion force, helping to establish Rome's foothold in Britannia. Inscriptions and tombstones attest to its presence at York, Iberacum, as late as AD 108, where soldiers carved their names into altars and commemorated fallen comrades with solemn epitaphs. And then, the silence. After that date, the 9th disappears from the official rolls. No muster lists, no victory dedications, no dispatches tell of its final chapter. What could silence a legion celebrated for its discipline and valor? The mainstream explanation holds that the 9th met its end in the wild lands beyond the Wall, overwhelmed by a coalition of Caledonian tribes in a savage uprising. A decisive defeat, some suggest, would explain why no victory monument was ever erected in Rome, and why the emperor's annals gloss over the loss as if too embarrassing to record. Yet the archaeological record offers only fragments. Scattered objects, broken pilum points, fragments of stamped lead bracelets hint at a violent clash somewhere in northern Britain. But no mass graves or charred camps have been definitively linked to the 9th. Could an army slip away from history so completely on Britain's windswept moors? Or did the legion simply march on, its number retired to spare the record of its shame, only to reappear under a different name? A competing theory suggests that the 9th was transferred to the Rhine frontier, where it may have been embroiled in conflicts with Germanic tribes. The sudden disappearance from Britannia's epigraphic trail might reflect redeployment rather than destruction. But here too the trail runs cold. Other legions on the Rhine boast detailed annual records, while the 9th leaves no trace. If transferred, did it meet its end in the tangled forests of the German limes, its cohorts swallowed by darkness once more? Venturing further, some historians have scoured the eastern provinces for clues. A tantalizing inscription in the region of modern Palestine mentions a Legion 9th in a context that could date to the Parthian Wars of the late 2nd century AD. If this reference indeed points to the original 9th, then perhaps the legion marched through Syria into Mesopotamia, only to vanish amid the chaos of Trajan's eastern campaigns. Could the ninth have been caught in the dust storms of Mesopotamia, lost to ambushes or epidemics far from its accustomed fields of battle? Speculative theories go deeper still. A handful of voices argue that the legion may have been purposefully disbanded by an emperor seeking to erase the memory of a disastrous command. Under this view, survivors were absorbed into other legions, their identity expunged to protect Rome's reputation. If true, the name Ninth would live on only in whispered conversations among veterans, its legacy hidden in the folds of military bureaucracy. Even more fringe is the notion that remnants of the Ninth found refuge beyond the empire's borders, perhaps serving as mercenaries for the very tribes once sworn to resist them. Could ex-legionaries, hardened by years in Rome's ranks, have lent their steel to Pictish raiders or Eastern warlords? Some medieval Welsh legends speak of foreign warriors founding new dynasties in the mists of Albion. Is it too fanciful to imagine descendants of the Ninth living on in Arthurian lore? As we probe these possibilities, we must acknowledge how little evidence remains. The Legion's disappearance invites us to confront the fragility of memory itself. Official annals can be edited, stone inscriptions can erode, oral traditions can fragment. What survives is a patchwork of theories, each supported by shadows rather than solid proof. And yet, within that ambiguity lies a deeper truth about history, that even the mightiest forces, 10,000 legionaries marching under gleaming standards, can disappear without a trace. In recent years, a new generation of researchers has turned to remote sensing and landscape archaeology, using LiDAR to peer beneath overgrown forts and scanning peat bogs for traces of ancient encampments. Every metal detector ping, every subsurface anomaly holds the promise of revelation. Could a stray gladius, lost in the heather, finally mark the site of a catastrophic battle? Might a fragment of stamped tile reveal a late career for the Ninth under a different banner? As the sun dips below the western horizon and the silhouettes of crumbling ramparts merge with the twilight, we are left with questions that reach into both the past and our own assumptions. What became of those legionaries who raised their shields against the unknown? Did they march to their doom on Britain's bleak frontiers? Or did they vanish into other worlds, east, west, or beyond the boundaries of empire? And perhaps most hauntingly, how many more stories of valor and tragedy remain buried beneath the landscapes we think we know? So we linger at the edge of memory, listening for the soft tread of boots long silenced, wondering whether the Ninth Roman Legion's ultimate fate will ever emerge from the mist. As the last echoes of Roman standards fade into the mist of memory, our path now turns eastward, across continents and millennia, to a burial mound veiled in legend and guarded by terracotta sentinels. Rising from the windswept plains of Xi'an in Shanxi province, the tomb of Qin Shi Huang looms like a mountain of earth and mystery. From a distance, its conical mound appears unassuming, a grassy hill dotted with scrub, but beneath that simple silhouette lies the sealed heart of China's first emperor, whose ambition reshaped an empire and whose resting place has resisted every attempt at full revelation. Built between 246 and 208 BC, the mausoleum was commissioned by Qin Shi Huang himself, the ruler who unified warring states under a centralized bureaucracy. Contemporary chronicles, from Sima Qian's Records of the Grand Historian to fragments unearthed in bamboo slips, recall that the emperor envisioned his afterlife as an eternal court. Artisans sculpted the now famous army of terracotta warriors to stand vigil for eternity, each figure unique in armor, rank, and facial expression. Bronze chariots, lacquered coffins, and jade burial suits were crafted for his entourage. But these surface treasures only hint at deeper marvels long hidden beneath the soil. Mainstream archaeology has focused on the satellite pits. Pit 1, the sprawling formation of more than 6,000 life-size figures. Pit 2 and Pit 3, smaller but no less enigmatic, and Pit 4, still a discovery in progress. These pits reveal funeral processions, mounted cavalry, and even acrobatic performers, all cast in baked clay and arrayed in battle formation. Yet the central tomb mound itself remains unexcavated, preserved behind a barrier of law and scientific caution. Why has the core of this necropolis, where Qin Shi Huang's actual coffin is believed to lie, been left untouched? The answer lies partly in ancient warnings. Sima Qian tells us that the emperor ordered rivers of mercury to flow beneath the burial chamber, simulating the waterways of his empire in miniature. Modern surveys have detected elevated mercury levels in soil samples atop the mound, lending credence to the text. Could these toxic currents still run below, posing hazards to excavators? Or might they be part of an intricate booby trap system, designed to thwart grave robbers and protect the emperor's final sanctuary? Beyond Mercury, the tomb complex spans nearly 56 square kilometers, far larger than the city of Xi'an itself. Terracotta figures dot the landscape, but satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar hint at concealed chambers and networks of corridors yet to be mapped. Some researchers propose that the emperor's inner sanctum contains massive bronze crossbows rigged to unleash a hail of arrows at intruders. Others speculate on pools of elixir that promised immortality in life and death, their chemical properties still preserved in sealed urns. If true, such discoveries would force us to rethink the technological and metallurgical capabilities of ancient China. Speculative threads weave through the narrative as vividly as the colored pigments on the warriors' uniforms. Local folklore speaks of ghostly apparitions that haunt the fields at dusk, processional lights moving in stately lines, accompanied by the faint clatter of horses' hooves. Farmers who till plots near the tomb occasionally unearth small clay fragments, often bearing the faint imprint of armor or a warrior's sash. Are these the discarded castings of preliminary molds, or debris scattered by past looters seeking shards of antiquity? Then there are the stories preserved in Ming Dynasty gazetteers that the tomb's interior mirrored the emperor's palace, its walls encrusted with jewels to mimic the heavens, and ceilings lacquered with gold to represent the sun at its zenith. If these accounts hold even a kernel of truth, the preservation conditions within the sealed chamber could rival those of Egypt's Valley of the Kings, where vibrant frescoes survived for millennia. Yet, unlike those tombs, Qin Shi Huang's mound is not a pilgrimage site. It remains largely off-limits, an archaeological lacuna in one of history's greatest imperial narratives. Scholars debate whether the central tomb will ever be opened. On one side, advocates argue that careful, minimally invasive techniques, 3D scanning, microsampling, and robotic excavation, could reveal its contents without unleashing deadly fumes or collapsing fragile structures. On the other, conservators warn that exposure to oxygen and light could irreversibly damage organic materials, wooden beams, painted lacquers, even the emperor's coffin itself. The Chinese government's decision to postpone full excavation reflects this tension between discovery and preservation. What then might lie beyond that sealed door we cannot see? Could we one day glimpse the emperor's resplendent burial chamber, its walls shimmering with gilded reliefs of dragons and mountains? Will we find scrolls carved in gold leaf, detailing Qin Shi Huang's philosophy of rulership and immortality rituals long forgotten? Or will the central tomb yield nothing but empty chambers, the emperor's ashes scattered by time or removed by early tomb robbers? We can, however, piece together fragments of his final journey. Written edicts in the Qin bureaucracy detail the logistics of constructing the necropolis. 10,000 laborers, each sworn to secrecy under penalty of death. Vast quantities of timber, bronze, and stone sourced from across the realm, and a hierarchical hierarchy of artisans, from carpenters and sculptors to alchemists and cartographers. Even the mausoleum's orientation, facing the sacred Qi Mountain to the east, reflects a calculated alignment with feng shui principles, blending cosmic order with imperial authority. Yet, for all this knowledge, the tomb remains a riddle. The terracotta warriors serve as silent proxies for an emperor whose own likeness we have yet to uncover. Coins minted in Qin Shi Huang's lifetime bear his name but offer no image, leaving us to imagine his visage through the artistry of his sculptors. Did they fashion a self-portrait in the clay guardians that line the pits? Or did they render an idealized sovereign, an icon of eternal power and inscrutability? As daylight slips away and the silhouettes of terracotta sentinels blur in the gathering shadows, we are reminded that some histories are safeguarded by silence. The tomb of Qin Shi Huang holds within its earthen mound the dreams of an emperor who strove to conquer death itself. And so, as we stand on the threshold of that hidden palace, we must ask, what marvels and warnings lie beyond the sealed corridors? Which truths will emerge when we finally, tentatively, remove the Earth's veil? How much of Qin Shi Huang's legacy will survive its own tomb's reveal, and how much will remain buried, forever enshrouded in mystery? As the terracotta sentinels of Qin Shi Huang's necropolis recede into the Earth's shadow, our journey leads us from sealed tombs to an expanse of sun-baked desert etched with curves and angles that defy easy explanation. High on a barren plateau in southern Peru, the Nazca Lines stretch across more than 450 square kilometers of ancient pampas, their shallow grooves carved into the ochre soil like the brushstrokes of a colossal, unseen artist. From ground level, they appear as mere furrows, narrow trenches edged by darker stones, but from the air, they resolve into geometric shapes, stylized animals, and miles-long straight lines that vanish into the horizon. Constructed by the Nazca culture between 200 BC and AD 600, these geoglyphs were etched with nothing more than simple tools: wooden stakes, ropes, and careful planning. The region's hyper-arid climate has preserved them for centuries, guarding their secrets against wind and rain. Yet for all their durability, we know surprisingly little about why they were made. Were they ceremonial pathways trodden by processions honoring agricultural deities? Did the straight lines serve as astronomical sightlines, marking the solstices or guiding stars? Mainstream archaeology points to a ritual landscape, one tied to water and fertility, vital concerns in a land where the nearest river lies beyond steep ravines. As dawn gilds the plateau, the ochre ground glows beneath the feet of researchers ascending a nearby hill. From this vantage point, the geoglyph of a hummingbird unfolds its slender beak toward the sky, its wings outstretched in mid-flight. Nearby, a monkey curls its tail in a perfect spiral, and a spider's legs extend with geometric precision. How did the Nazca surveyors achieve such scale and symmetry without aerial perspectives? Scholars suggest they used simple poles and sight lines, but the exact methods remain speculative. Could there have been lost surveying techniques, passed down through generations yet vanished with the Nazca society itself? More puzzling still are the straight lines, some running for over 20 kilometers, cutting across hills and valleys alike. These avenues cross at right angles, forming grids that seem to have no logical terminus. Why carve them so long and so perfectly straight? Were they routes for ritual pilgrimage, intended to be walked in silence under the sun? Or did they represent symbolic pathways, roads for gods rather than humans, drawn in honor of celestial visitors? The debate has lingered for decades, each new drone survey adding detail but deepening the mystery. Venturing into the realm of speculation, a few voices cite the possibility of archaeoastronomy taken to its poetic limit. Could the lines align with constellations long since shifted by precession, their orientations accurate to a single degree? Some researchers have correlated certain shapes with star patterns visible in the first millennium BC, implying a celestial map encoded in the Earth. But skeptics point out that many alignments are ambiguous, and the sheer number of lines allows for patterns to emerge by chance. Are we imposing modern astronomical fascination onto a culture that may have had entirely different cosmological priorities? Then there are the more fringe theories that capture the public imagination. That the Nazca Lines were airstrips for ancient visitors, laid out for crafts in mythic skies. A handful of enthusiasts argue that the geoglyphs mark landing zones for extraterrestrial travelers, pointing to the line's visibility from above as evidence. While these ideas stretch beyond scholarly acceptance, they underscore how deeply the Nazca puzzle resonates with our desire for contact with the unknown. Even if we dismiss such notions, they remind us that the lines tap into universal questions. Who were our cosmic neighbors? How might a civilization reach beyond its earthbound limits in search of meaning? On the ground, recent investigations have revealed unexpected layers of complexity. Excavations near the body of a geoglyph show that some lines run deeper than others, suggesting different phases of construction, some hundreds of years apart. Petroglyphs and painted pottery at nearby villages contain motifs echoed in the lines, hinting at shared symbolic language. Could the geoglyphs have evolved over generations, each new ruler or priest adding fresh designs to a continuing canvas? If so, the plateau becomes a living chronicle, its lines marking the ebb and flow of power, ritual, and communal identity. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have also detected subsurface features, a buried aqueduct here, a cluster of stone platforms there, suggesting that the lines were integrated into a broader ceremonial complex. Buried mounds that once held offerings of maize and shellfish lie just beyond the geoglyphs, their contents hinting at water rites conducted in the heart of the desert. Yet the precise relationship between these structures and the surface lines remains elusive. Were the geoglyphs the public face of a mystery only fully revealed in hidden chambers below? As the sun dips toward the western horizon, the shadows lengthen across the plateau, carving new patterns between the lines themselves. The wind, ever present in this high desert, moves the loose pebbles aside, exposing fresh segments of ancient trench. We realize that the earth beneath our feet is not a static canvas, but a palimpsest, erased and rewritten by human hands over centuries. Each new study, each fresh drone flight, adds to our mapping of the lines. Yet with every detail we uncover, the broader purpose seems to recede further into time. And so we pause, at the edge of human understanding and the wide, open sky. The Nazca Lines refuse to yield to quick explanations or singular theories. They remain an invitation to wonder, an enduring earthbound mystery that reaches up to the heavens. What did these shapes mean to the people who carved them? Which rituals played out beneath the unrelenting sun as the stakes were driven into the ground? And are there still lines undiscovered, hidden in gullies and under drifting sands, waiting for the next curious mind to uncover their secrets? As the sun dips below the horizon of the Nazca Desert and the last shadows of ancient lines fade from view, we turn our attention from the Earth's surface to a piece of cloth woven with questions that span centuries. Housed in the dimly lit Chapelle du Trésor within Turin Cathedral, the Shroud of Turin rests behind layers of glass, its linen fibers faintly glowing under carefully controlled illumination. Stretching nearly 4.5 meters long and just over 1 meter wide, the shroud bears the ghostly imprint of a man. Front and back images rendered in sepia tones, each detail both arrestingly vivid and frustratingly elusive. Scholars trace the shroud's documented history to the late 14th century, emerging in the hands of a French knight named Geoffroy de Charny around 1355. Yet questions of origin reach deeper. Radiocarbon testing in 1988 dated the cloth to between AD 1260 and 1390, placing it squarely in the medieval period. Critics point to these results as proof of a later forgery. But others note anomalies. Pollen grains from plants endemic to Palestine have been found embedded in the fibers, as have traces of coins minted in the 1st century AD. Which time frame holds the key? Could the linen have been rewoven in a later era around an older relic? Or might contamination have skewed the carbon tests? The image itself is no less mysterious. Under close examination, through ultraviolet photography and digital enhancement, scientists have documented three-dimensional information encoded in the tonal variations of the image. The shading on the shroud corresponds to depth, as if an ancient projector had captured the contours of a human body. How could such a photogrammetric imprint exist on a cloth without the brushstrokes of an artist or the chemicals of modern photography? Were there lost technologies or techniques that transferred a living form onto linen? Mainstream historians point to documented medieval interest in relics and the flourishing of artful textile work. Forgeries were not unknown in an age when pilgrim badges and sacred tokens held immense devotional value. Yet the shroud's subtle bloodstains, tested to contain human hemoglobin, and the presence of pollen from plants blooming around Jerusalem in spring raise questions. If this were a medieval copy, how did forgers acquire genuine 1st century relics? Could the cloth have traversed centuries and continents, passing through custodians who understood its power and guarded its secrets? Speculative theories expand the conversation. Some researchers propose that the shroud was the product of early photographic experiments, using silver nitrate and sunlight to produce an image on fabric. If such proto-photographic techniques existed, they would upend our understanding of medieval science. Others suggest an alchemical process, invoking historical texts that describe the use of starches and mineral pigments to transfer images. Yet experimental recreations have struggled to replicate the shroud's unique combination of superficial discoloration and three-dimensional data without leaving telltale signs of paint or scorch. A more mystical current flows through the shroud's story, one that refuses to be confined by laboratories. Devotees speak of startling coincidences, anatomical accuracy in the depiction of wounds that correspond to descriptions of crucifixion, including puncture marks at the wrists and feet, a laceration across the forehead, and a chest wound to the side. Medical examinations in the 1970s, led by a team known as the Shroud of Turin Research Project, STURP, concluded that the blood patterns are consistent with those produced by gravity acting on a crucified body. Yet skeptics argue that these conclusions lean on subjective interpretation. Then there are the whispered legends, that the shroud was discovered by the Knights Templar in the ruins of Solomon's Temple in Palestine, or that it was hidden during the iconoclasm of the Byzantine Empire and resurfaced in the West centuries later. These stories lack firm documentary support, but they speak to the shroud's magnetic pull on the imagination. Could layers of myth have accreted around an object whose origin was already shrouded in mystery? And if so, what kernels of truth lie buried in those legends, waiting for the historian's trowel to unearth them? In recent decades, new technologies have been applied in an effort to navigate between faith and science. Spectroscopic analysis has identified traces of limestone dust, possibly consistent with burial caves in Jerusalem. High-definition microscopy reveals fiber structures that hint at specialized weaving patterns once common in the eastern Mediterranean. But each finding seems to open another door. If the cloth was manufactured in Palestine, how did it travel to Liry, France, by the mid-14th century? Which networks of devotion and trade carried it across oceans and empires? Conservationists now face their own dilemma. Exposure to light and oxygen risks further degradation, yet limiting access hampers research. The Vatican's cautious stewardship has kept the shroud largely out of the laboratory, preserving it for future generations, but also preserving its mysteries. As debates continue over permissible testing, the balance between safeguarding a cherished relic and satisfying scholarly inquiry remains precarious. And so, as dusk settles in the Chapel du Trésor and the faint glow of monitoring lights reveals the faint trace of a face in the cloth, we are left with questions that bridge the tangible and the transcendent. Is the Shroud of Turin a masterful medieval creation, a relic woven and painted to inspire wonder? Or is it an artifact of deeper origin, bearing the imprint of a distant life and death? What vanished techniques, lost to time and turmoil, might explain its creation? And perhaps most poignantly, how does a simple piece of linen become a canvas for our hopes, our skepticism, and our quest for meaning? We step away from the display case, our footsteps echoing softly on marble floors, mindful that some mysteries endure precisely because they defy resolution. The Shroud of Turin remains a silent witness to human devotion, artistry, and the persistent pull of the unknown, waiting in its glass chamber for the day when history, science, and belief will converge to shine new light on its enigmatic image. As the hush of Turin's cathedral fades from our minds, we turn our journey westward and northward, across the Atlantic to a small, windswept island off the coast of Nova Scotia. Oak Island rises from the fog-bound sea like a sentinel guarding centuries of secrets. Its evergreen forests sway above rocky inlets, and at its heart lies a roughly circular depression known as the Money Pit. Here, a weathered wooden platform sits just below the soil, flanked by curious stone markers set in a triangular pattern. By lantern light, the ground here seems to pulse with echoes of past diggers and whispered promises of buried treasure. The Oak Island mystery began in 1795, when a young man named Daniel McGinnis spotted a depression in the earth and, with two companions, began to dig. At just 6 feet, they sank into a layer of flagstones. 30 feet down, they encountered platforms of oak logs. At 60 feet, flood tunnels channeled seawater into their shaft, forcing them to abandon hope for the moment. Over the next 2 centuries, multiple expeditions braved collapsing tunnels and rising waters, driven by fragments of lore that Captain Kidd's pirate horde lay hidden here, or that Knights Templar relics were buried to protect sacred documents, or even that Francis Bacon's lost manuscripts rested beneath the boggy soil. Mainstream historians caution that Oak Island's legends may be rooted in wishful thinking. They point to 19th century treasure hunting's romantic flair, newspapers eager for sensational headlines, local entrepreneurs eager to draw investment. Indeed, many shafts and tunnels have gone unanswered, and some early diggers likely misinterpreted natural sinkholes as man-made chambers. Yet the persistence of genuine artifacts, coconut fibers, charcoal, lead musket balls, and fragments of inscribed metal, suggests human hands shaped some of these subterranean workings. How do we reconcile the engineer's diagrams of flood tunnels with the gambler's tales of pirate booty? As we peer closer, the island's topography offers fresh puzzles. An elaborate causeway, a man-made trench between the Money Pit and a nearby cove, has been uncovered beneath layers of peat, stone, and sand. During heavy rain or high tide, water rushes through subterranean channels, flooding deep shafts within minutes. Was this a defensive measure to deter looters, or a crude trap sprung by desperate treasure seekers? Could the builders have understood tidal hydraulics well enough to construct deliberate flood tunnels? And if so, who among 18th century mariners possessed such engineering skill? Speculative theories probe even further. Some researchers suggest that the treasure is not gold or jewels at all, but ancient manuscripts, perhaps scrolls that predate the modern Bible, smuggled here by Templar knights fleeing persecution. Others propose that the depositors were Spanish sailors escaping the collapse of the Armada, burying New World plunder in a place beyond imperial reach. Fringe voices speak of Norse explorers, Carthaginian traders, or even survivors of the Roman Empire hiding caches of wealth and knowledge in the New World centuries before Columbus. Yet for every theory, the island yields both promise and frustration. In the 1960s, divers discovered a small metal box sealed in clay at the bottom of one shaft. When opened, it proved empty. Later, metallurgical analysis detected traces of gold on the island's rocks, but so minute as to suggest only contamination from past digs. And while modern geophysical surveys, magnetometry, ground-penetrating radar have mapped anomalies deep beneath the surface, none have yet revealed a chamber large enough to hold a pirate's trove or Templar archive. The human cost of this pursuit is not lost on those who stand at the money pit's edge. Countless shafts have collapsed, claims have been made and withdrawn, and a few intrepid treasure hunters have risked, and sometimes lost, their lives to explore treacherous tunnels. Yet the island's steely grip on the imagination endures. Why does our fascination with Oak Island persist, even as every generation of technology and capital fails to deliver definitive answers? Perhaps because the pit is more than a hole in the ground. It is a mirror reflecting our own yearning for discovery, our willingness to dig through layers of earth and myth in search of something precious. Adding to the island's mystique are fragments of verse and rhyme carved into oak planks at depths of over 70 feet. 40 feet below, 2 million pounds lie buried. Whether these lines are authentic or a clever 19th century hoax remains unsettled, but they fuel expeditions today. Teams drilling through glacial till, sluicing peat bogs, and scouring coves for hidden shafts. Satellite imaging reveals subtle topographical shifts where the forest returns to scrubland, possible signs of ancient trenches refilled with sediment. Drills bring up wood, metal, and occasionally human-made debris, but so far, no definitive treasure. Local lore keeps the mystery alive. Islanders recount stories of ghostly lantern lights bobbing among the pines, heard the lament of disembodied voices after midnight, and found inexplicable carving tools scattered on forest floors. Folklore speaks of a curse laid upon the pit, 7 tragedies before the treasure is found, if it exists at all. Whether these tales sprang from genuine experiences or from the island's atmospheric charm, they lend Oak Island a presence that transcends cartography and excavation reports. As dusk falls over Mahone Bay, the money pit settles into shadow, its wooden platforms half submerged and its flood tunnels murmuring beneath the earth. We are left with questions that reach into both geology and legend. Who first chose this remote spit of land to bury their secret? Was it treasure, sacred relics, or simply a hoax born of youthful curiosity? What blend of human ingenuity and natural forces has shaped the pit's enduring architecture? And most hauntingly, is there truly something vast and hidden beneath these layers of peat, clay, and stone? Or does the greatest treasure lie in the story itself, passed from hand to hand, generation to generation? Standing on the edge of that enigmatic depression, we confront the pull of the unknown, aware that Oak Island will continue to guard its secrets as long as we are willing to listen. And so, as we step back from the money pit and the island's silent sentinel trees, we are left to wonder, what waits, still unclaimed, beneath the shifting sands and the ripple of the tides? As the tides of Oak Island's legends recede into our memories, we now chart a course across oceans of ink and parchment, to a map that has captivated scholars and dreamers alike. Spread before us is the fragmentary yet astonishingly detailed map of Piri Reis. Drawn in 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis, this hand-colored sheet of gazelle skin parchment unfolds into a panorama of coastlines both familiar and mysterious. In the gentle lamplight of a dimly lit study, its lines and place names seem to pulse with the spirit of early exploration. Compass roses bloom in red and green, undulating script records the names of islands, and the salty spray of the Atlantic is captured in delicate waves scored along the edges. Piri Reis himself notes in his accompanying commentary that he compiled this map from some 20 older charts and logbooks, including accounts from Portuguese seafarers and Arab navigators, and fragments of a lost map of Christopher Columbus. Indeed, the map's western edge depicts the bulging coast of South America with remarkable accuracy for its time, while the African shoreline to the east curves with a precision that eluded European mapmakers for decades to come. Mainstream historians celebrate the map as a milestone in cartographic synthesis, a masterwork of Renaissance geography that bridges medieval traditions and the dawning age of discovery. Yet as our eyes trace the lines southward, a curious shape emerges, a landmass that many believe corresponds to the northern coast of Antarctica, drawn long before its official discovery in 1820. Here, shaded contours suggest mountain ranges and inlets, features that would not be visible beneath the continent's modern ice sheet. Piri Reis's notes claim that some source maps dated back to the time of Alexander the Great, acquired through ancient Egyptian archives. Could fragments of a pre-classical chart have survived centuries of turmoil, carrying forward knowledge of lands lost beneath ice and snow? Such questions draw us beyond traditional cartography into the realm of speculation. Some researchers propose that the map preserves echoes of a seafaring civilization older than Rome, one capable of circumnavigating Africa and reaching the Atlantic fringes. Did the Phoenicians, famed for their maritime prowess, chart these shores in an age before written records? Or might the map's unusual coastal outline stem from early, accurately surveyed charts of Patagonia, misinterpreted by Piri Reis as a continuous southern continent? Closer inspection reveals further enigmas. Coastlines are often adorned with miniature drawings, ships under full sail, sea monsters lurking in deep canals, clusters of palm trees on distant isles. These embellishments reflect the artistic conventions of the time, yet some sea creatures, serpent-like dragons entwined around rocky promontories, appear nowhere else in Piri's oeuvre. Do these fantastical beasts signal genuine sailors' tales, warnings of treacherous currents and uncharted shoals? Or are they symbolic guardians, markers of regions deemed perilous or sacred? The map's very survival adds to its mystique. A fragment discovered among the papers of a Topkapi Palace library in Istanbul, it bears the browned edges of centuries and the tiny pinholes of library cataloging. Why was this ambitious chart never copied in full, as other important maps were? Did later Ottoman scholars deem it too controversial, or did it simply vanish from view, buried beneath layers of state archives until its serendipitous rediscovery in 1929? Scientific analysis offers both insights and fresh puzzles. Infrared imaging has revealed faint annotations beneath the visible lines, place names erased or overwritten, perhaps in an earlier draft. Pigment studies show that Piri Reis mixed local mineral ochres with imported Mediterranean dyes, indicating a workshop well supplied with rare materials. Yet there are no surviving records of such specialized workshops in early 16th century Istanbul. Was the map a private commission for a powerful patron, or part of a secret navigational school at the imperial court? Venturing into fringe territory, some theorists suggest that the map encodes cryptic messages or geometric principles lost to time. They point to the apparent use of a proto-Mercator projection, an innovation not commonly attributed to cartographers until a century later. If Piri Reis understood how to project a curved globe onto a flat plane, who taught him? Could there have been an unrecorded tradition of mathematical geography among Ottoman scholars, borrowing from earlier Islamic or Hellenistic sources? Then there are whispers of Atlantean lore, that the map's southern reaches hint at lands submerged beneath the waves, remnants of a vanished empire. While no credible geological evidence supports the existence of a lost Atlantic continent, the idea persists in popular imagination. It speaks to our longing for hidden histories, for civilizations that might have flourished and fallen without leaving a clear trace, and of the possibility that maps like Piri Reis's carry faint echoes of those vanished worlds. Today, cartographers and historians continue to puzzle over the map's gaps and distortions. Digital overlays of modern coastlines show astonishing alignments in some regions and glaring inaccuracies in others. Why would Piri draw West Africa with near-perfect fidelity, but render the Atlantic archipelago with only rough approximations? Was he relying on multiple, inconsistent sources? And if so, can we reconstruct those lost charts by comparing the discrepancies? As we roll the parchment gently from its protective case and let our gaze drift over the centuries-old script, we confront the enduring tension between what we know and what remains concealed. The map of Piri Reis stands at the crossroads of scholarship and speculation, reminding us that every line drawn on paper is also a line drawn through time, connecting past explorers, vanished sources, and our own insatiable curiosity. And so, as twilight falls and the map's inked coastlines fade into shadow, we are left with a question as open as the ocean itself. What other charts lie undiscovered, hidden in forgotten libraries or sunken archives, waiting to reshape our understanding of the world? As the ink of Piri Reis's chart fades into the night, our exploration turns back toward the sands, this time to the Giza Plateau, where the Great Sphinx stands sentinel in silent repose. At dawn, the statue's leonine shoulders catch the first amber light, casting deep shadows across its weathered flank. Behind it, limestone bedrock rises in striated terraces, each band etched with subtle scallops and grooves that ripple like wind-sculpted dunes. The air here is dry and still, yet the stone seems to bear the memory of water, its surfaces marked by patterns that some say resemble the scars of ancient rainstorms rather than mere desert winds. Traditional Egyptology dates the Sphinx to around 2500 BC, attributing its carving to the reign of Pharaoh Khafra. According to mainstream explanations, centuries of wind and sand have worn the surface unevenly, while intermittent human restoration smoothed some areas and left others rough. Yet in the 1990s, geologist Dr. Robert Schoch raised a different possibility. Examining photographs and conducting field surveys, he observed vertical fissures and rounded depressions on the Sphinx's enclosure walls, features more consistent with prolonged exposure to flowing or pooling water than with the abrasive scour of sand and wind alone. Could a chapter of Egypt's climate history, long erased by time, have left its mark on this ancient monument? Mainstream archaeologists acknowledge that the Sphinx's limestone blocks formed part of a natural outcrop, quarried on site and sculpted into mythic form. They point out that aeolian erosion, the process of wind-driven sand blasting rock, can produce undulating surfaces, especially when combined with the patchwork of ancient repairs. Moreover, historical records describe frequent restoration efforts under successive pharaohs and Roman governors, making it difficult to distinguish original carving from later patchwork. Yet the debate hinges on a simple question. What kind of weathering shaped the deeper channels and bowl-like cavities that appear not only on the Sphinx's body, but on the surrounding walls? If the predominant erosional force was water, the implication is profound. Egypt's climate must once have been far wetter, with significant rainfall falling on the Giza Plateau. Geological studies confirm that the Sahara experienced multiple pluvial periods, when monsoon rains extended far north of the Nile Valley. Some suggest that these humid intervals peaked as early as 7000 BC, long before the era of the Old Kingdom. If water carved those grooves, who chiseled the Sphinx atop them? And at what point did ancient masons encounter stone already softened by centuries of moisture? Venturing into this hypothesis invites a broader inquiry into the origins of civilization itself. Could an earlier culture, flourishing in a greener Sahara, have erected monumental structures that were later reused or reimagined by dynastic Egyptians? Fringe theories extend the timeline even further back, proposing that an advanced society, sometimes linked to the myth of Atlantis, laid down foundations of stone, only for their name and deeds to be swallowed by millennia of shifting sands. While no unequivocal evidence supports such tales, the water erosion argument underscores how much remains hidden beneath the desert's veneer. Back on the plateau, subtle clues emerge for patient observers. In certain light, the Sphinx's shoulders display patches of smoother limestone interspersed with deeply pitted sections, anomalies that correspond to layers of differing hardness in the original bedrock. Geologists note that some of the softer beds would erode rapidly under heavy rainfall, forming rounded hollows within decades. Could these hollows be relics of a time when the plateau was blanketed by storms, before the Sahara's inexorable desertification? Intriguingly, surveys of other Giza monuments reveal similar weathering patterns. The walls of Khafra's Valley Temple, adjacent to the Sphinx, bear vertical grooves that mirror those in the enclosure. If these features resulted from torrential runoff, they predate recorded history and challenge our understanding of when and how the Nile's floodplain contracted to its present course. Were early sculptors working on stone already reshaped by water, or did later floods wash over newly carved surfaces, obliterating original contours? Speculative voices have seized on these puzzles to suggest that the Sphinx marks a convergence of three eras: a pre-dynastic construction phase, an Old Kingdom resculpting, and subsequent Roman or Byzantine restorations. Under this view, Khafra's artisans may have refurbished an existing monument, its head recarved to reflect current fashions, its body reshaped to erase traces of older iconography. The alignment of the Sphinx, gazing eastward toward the rising sun, could thus reflect a layering of religious symbolism accrued over countless generations. Yet even as we entertain these possibilities, the evidence remains circumstantial. Subsurface radar scans have identified voids and anomalies beneath the Sphinx's frontal platform, potentially remnants of undiscovered chambers or quarries. Drilling cores extracted small samples of masonry that await further petrographic analysis, offering clues to the chronology of repairs. And renewed climate models, integrating sediment cores from the Nile Delta, promise to refine our understanding of ancient rainfall patterns. Still, no excavation has yet untangled the Sphinx's composite history in a way that decisively favors water erosion over wind-driven decay, or vice versa. Standing before the Sphinx in the cool of dawn, we confront a paradox, a monument intended to endure eternity, yet shaped by forces both deliberate and elemental. Its visage, wrathed with enigmatic calm, bears witness to the passage of empires and the slow artistry of rainfall. What worlds once existed here, when the stones were carved in an age of greening farmlands and subterranean springs? Which hands brought chisel to limestone, and to what image did they aspire? As the sun climbs higher and the desert heat rises, the Sphinx's shadows shift once more, smoothing the furrows of the night into the subtle relief of carved stone. We walk around its flanks, mindful that every groove might tell a story of vanished skies, of waters that once rushed across this plateau, of artists who shaped stone already softened by rain. And so, as we step away from that timeless sentinel, we leave with an unresolved question echoing in the dry air. How many layers of human intention and climatic change lie buried here? And what secrets will yield when the sands of Giza finally give way to discovery? As the last ripples of Giza's weathered stone fade from our thoughts, we journey across the Mediterranean to the sun-dappled hills of southern Crete. where an unassuming shard of fired clay has captured the imagination of historians and cryptographers for over a century. Discovered in 1908 by the Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernier within the ruins of the ancient Minoan palace at Phaistos, this disc, barely 16 centimeters across, bears a spiral of stamped symbols that seem to emerge from the clay as if by magic. Each sign, pressed into the soft material before firing, retains the crisp impression of a small wooden block, suggesting a level of mass production and deliberate design far beyond what we typically expect from the 2nd millennium BC. The Phaistos Disc's front and back are covered in 242 individual symbols, arranged in a continuous coil that winds from the outer rim toward the center. Among these are familiar motifs, human figures, tools, plant forms, alongside abstract geometries that defy easy categorization. Could this be the earliest known example of movable type, a precursor to printing by over 3,000 years? Or was the disc a one-off ritual object, its symbols encoded by a single scribe for purposes now lost to time? Mainstream scholarship situates the disc within the Minoan Bronze Age, roughly around 1700 BC, when the palace at Phaistos flourished as a hub of trade and artistic innovation. Yet no parallel inscriptions have been found on the island, or anywhere else in the Aegean, making the disc a singular enigma. Attempts to link its symbols to the Linear A or Linear B scripts have yielded inconclusive results. Some signs resemble known syllabic characters, while others have no counterpart in the established corpora. Could the disc represent a regional dialect, a ceremonial lexicon, or an entirely separate writing system devised for a specific cult or guild? We turn the disc in our hands, imagining the Minoan artisan applying each stamp with practiced precision, and wonder about its function. Was it a liturgical tool? Perhaps a hymn or invocation rendered in an early priestly script? The spiral's inward path may echo a journey from the outer world into the sacred center, guiding participants through a sequence of recitations or rites. Alternatively, the repetition of certain symbols, groups of plumed helmets or grain sheaves, hints at numerical or calendrical applications. Could the disc have served as an agricultural almanac, tracking sowing and harvest cycles in a society where the rhythms of nature were sacralized? Turning from ritual to the realm of the mundane, some scholars propose that the disc was a game board, its stamped tokens indicating moves in a spectator pastime. In an age when frescoes depict dancers and bull leapers, might the Minoans have devised strategic contests played on clay? Yet this theory struggles to account for the seeming intentionality of the spiral and the absence of wear patterns one would expect from repeated handling. More speculative voices reach further back into the mists of legend. Could the disc preserve a fragment of the lost Atlantean knowledge that Plato described, symbols handed down from a vanished world and encoded in clay to stand the test of time? Or might it reflect contact with ancient Egyptian scribes, its unusual printing technique inspired by hieroglyphic seal impressions brought by traders crossing the sea? While no direct archaeological link supports these ideas, they underscore how the disc unsettles conventional narratives of technological and linguistic development. Scientific investigation has illuminated certain aspects of the disc. Thermoluminescence dating confirms its Bronze Age origin, while microscopic analysis of the clay's composition ties the material to local Cretan deposits. High-resolution imagery reveals minute fingerprints and tool marks, suggesting that the stamps were carved by a single artisan or small workshop. Yet even the most advanced imaging cannot decipher meaning where no comparative text exists. Each symbol remains a cipher, its voice silent without a Rosetta Stone to provide translation. In recent decades, computational methods have joined the search. Pattern recognition algorithms analyze the disc's syntax, seeking repeating sequences that might correspond to grammatical structures. Statistical models compare frequency counts to known languages, searching for echoes of familiar linguistic rhythms. Some enthusiasts claim tentative breakthroughs, identifying phrases that could read as dedications to a mother goddess or invocations of a storm deity. Yet these interpretations rely on assumptions about sign values and language family affiliations that remain unverified. As the Mediterranean breeze stirs the olive groves around the excavated palace at Phaistos, we remember that the disc was found among ashes and collapsed columns, perhaps buried in the destruction of natural disaster or human conflict. Was it intentionally interred as a time capsule, a sacred relic to outlive the fall of the Minoan civilization? Or was it simply lost amid the chaos of abandonment, its meaning destined to be forgotten until modern eyes uncovered its spiral of mystery? Photogrammetric surveys of the disc in its museum setting reveal subtle color variations in the clay, perhaps the result of selective firing or post-depositional chemical changes. Could these differences mark sections intended for separate recitations or denote hierarchical importance among the symbols? Each new technical insight seems to open fresh questions. Why was the disc sealed within a pottery jar, and where did that jar originate? Might there be sister artifacts awaiting discovery in nearby islands or submerged within the depths of the Aegean? Standing before the display case in Herakleon's Archaeological Museum, we confront the disc's enduring appeal. It is an artifact that bridges art and technology, language and ritual, the known and the unknowable. Just as the Sphinx, the disc's circular form gazes back at us, challenging our assumptions about the ancients' sophistication and our own capacity to reconstruct vanished worlds. And so we place the disc gently on its velvet cushion and step away into the museum's hushed galleries, mindful that some stories remain half-told, not for lack of effort, but because the inscribed clay speaks in a tongue forever beyond our grasp. What civilization devised these symbols? Which ritual, prayer, or narrative did they intend to preserve? And where else might the voice of the Minoans be waiting, pressed into clay or stone, ready for the next curious mind to listen? As the spiral of stamped symbols on the Phaistos disc fades into the fading light of Crete, our journey carries us across the Caribbean Sea to the lush, rolling landscapes of southern Costa Rica. Here in the verdant lowlands near the village of Palmar Sur lie the stone spheres of the Dikis Delta, hundreds of granite orbs ranging from palm-sized to over 2 meters in diameter, scattered across pastures and peeking from beneath banana palms. In the early morning mist, the spheres emerge like silent sentinels, smooth, almost mirror-polished, their curved surfaces reflecting dew-laden ferns and the muted light of dawn. These remarkable spheres were first recorded by settlers in the 1930s, rolling free as sugarcane fields were cleared. Subsequent surveys revealed they belonged to the pre-Columbian Dikis culture, flourishing between AD 300 and 800. Carved from igneous rock, each sphere required the removal of countless kilos of stone, shaped with hammerstones and abrasive grit into a near-perfect form. How did artisans of a society without metal tools or advanced machinery achieve such precision? And why place these monumental spheres in seemingly random clusters, sometimes aligned, sometimes isolated, but rarely in straight rows? Mainstream archaeologists view the spheres as markers of social hierarchy, perhaps delineating the plazas of elite compounds. Excavations at nearby shell-midden sites uncovered fragments of ceramic bowls and jade beads, suggesting that the orbs stood amidst feasting areas or sacred precincts. Some alignments hint at astronomical orientations, groups of spheres pointing towards solstice sunrise or the passage of the Pleiades, implying a cosmological dimension to their placement. Yet the stones themselves yield no inscriptions or carvings. Their power lies solely in their form and context. As we tread carefully among the orbs, the smoothness of their surfaces is striking, Some bear circular grooves, deliberate repairs or later vandalism. Others show faint striations, testaments to the grinding process used to level their surfaces. Could the spheres have served as primitive abacuses, their grooves marking numerical tallies for communal labor or tribute? Or were they instead ritual stones, rolled ceremonially to announce the harvest or call down rain in this seasonally parched landscape? Speculative theories deepen the intrigue. A handful of voices suggest that the spheres were not carved locally, but transported from distant quarries, an enormous logistical feat implying raft building and riverine navigation beyond what we currently credit to the Decease. If true, might there remain undiscovered landing sites on riverbanks where spheres were offloaded? Others propose that the spheres are remnants of an even older tradition, a megalithic practice echoing stone ball monuments found in Colombia and the Amazon basin, hinting at a network of shared ritual across Central and South America long before the Inca. Fringe narratives reach further still. Some enthusiasts speculate about lost civilizations, Atlantis-like societies that once spanned oceans, leaving behind these spheres as cryptic markers of forgotten trade routes. Others invoke the extraterrestrial hypothesis, pointing to the sphere's uncanny precision and speculating that advanced beings guided their creation. While no solid evidence supports such ideas, they underscore the sense of wonder these stones inspire, and our hunger for origins that stretch beyond conventional archaeology. Recent technological advances offer fresh insights without abandoning caution. 3D scanning of several spheres has quantified their deviations from true roundness, often within a few centimeters over their entire diameter, remarkable accuracy for handheld tools. Geochemical analysis ties most of the granite to outcrops in the Talamanca Mountains, more than 50 kilometers away, confirming that the Diki undertook monumental quarrying expeditions. Ground-penetrating radar around sphere groupings has revealed buried features, post holes, hearths, and pathways, suggesting that the orbs anchored spaces of communal gathering. Yet, as new data accumulates, more questions emerge. Why were many spheres intentionally buried or broken before Spanish contact, only to be exhumed centuries later by modern farmers? Were they decommissioned by rival chiefdoms or ritually killed during socio-political upheaval? And what guided their final rediscovery in fields, streambeds, and even golf course fairways, so that these silent stones continue to surprise us? As the afternoon sun shifts behind palm fronds, the sphere's shadows spread across the grass, evoking gears of an immense, ancient timepiece. We trace our fingers along their cool surfaces, imagining the hands that smoothed every curve and the feet that walked between them in solemn procession. These stones are more than archaeological curiosities. They are touchstones of human curiosity, reminding us that technical skill and ritual intent can coexist in forms both elegant and enigmatic. Thus, as we step away from the last gleaming orb, its round perfection undimmed by centuries of sun and rain, we carry with us the echo of questions unanswered. How many spheres remain buried beneath the delta's rich soil? Which networks of belief wove these stones into the fabric of daily life? And what other mysteries lie hidden in the tangled undergrowth of time, waiting for the next curious mind to brush away the moss and listen to the whispers of carved stone? As the polished spheres of Costa Rica fade from our hands, our path veers into the dense emerald embrace of South America's cloud forests, toward a yawning chasm hidden beneath the canopy. High in the Cordillera del Condor of southeastern Ecuador, where mist coils around boulders and orchids cling to moss-draped branches, lies the entrance to the Tayos Caves. Here, a narrow opening in the limestone escarpment drops into darkness so absolute that the jungle's roar above seems a distant memory. Stalactites drip in the hush, their slow cadence echoing through yawning passages carved by water over millennia. Long before modern explorers arrived with headlamps and climbing ropes, the indigenous Shuar people spoke of sacred tunnels, pathways to the underworld where spirits dwelled. In their lore, the caves were a repository of ancestral knowledge, guarded by invisible sentinels and accessible only to those who respected the old ways. When the German explorer Alexander von Humboldt ventured through the region in the early 19th century, he heard faint rumors from local guides, stories of metal tablets and lost libraries buried in the depths. Though Humboldt himself found no proof, his passing references ignited the cave's reputation as a source of untold secrets. The first systematic exploration began in the 1960s, when oil company geologists mapping the area noted a series of sinkholes leading to vast chambers. Over the next decade, expeditions led by Ecuador's National Geographic Society mapped more than 6 kilometers of subterranean labyrinth, revealing chambers adorned with delicate flowstone, columns, and subterranean rivers. These surveys confirmed the cave's status as one of the most extensive karst systems in South America, carved by groundwater dissolving limestone over tens of thousands of years. Yet for all their geological brilliance, the passageways yielded no golden artifacts, no inscriptions on metallic plates. Instead, explorers found fragments of pottery, stone tools, and the occasional bone, suggesting sporadic human presence but no permanent settlement. In 1976, the caves captured global attention when British explorer Stan Hall and Ecuadorian businessman Juan Morix claimed to have discovered a hidden chamber containing metallic books, copper plates embossed with unknown characters. According to Moritz, these plates were arranged on a stone altar beneath a low-slung dome, illuminated by natural light filtered through cracks above. He described corridors whose walls bore reliefs of human-like figures and passageways that seemed to defy the known topography. Subsequent expeditions reached the same chamber but reported only an empty nook, its floor littered with sediment. Did early explorers inadvertently remove or lose these plates? Or were Moritz's accounts the product of fading memories and the cave's shifting sands? Mainstream archaeologists regard the metallic book narrative with skepticism. They note the lack of physical evidence. No plates have ever been photographed, cataloged, or scientifically analyzed. Given the cave's dynamic environment, with floods that can scour tunnels in minutes, any objects left unanchored might vanish or be buried under silt. Furthermore, the region's complex geology makes precise mapping challenging. Passages shift, new chambers open, and previous survey points can be obscured by rockfall. Yet the absence of proof has not quenched the allure of discovery. How many side passages remain uncharted, waiting to be revealed by a fresh breeze or a fallen stalactite? Venturing deeper into speculation, a handful of researchers propose that the caves were part of an ancient network, an underground highway linking Andean highlands to Amazonian lowlands. Trade goods, ceremonial objects, and perhaps even esoteric knowledge could have passed through these galleries, carried by priest pilgrims attuned to subterranean rituals. Could fragments of lost moche or chimu iconography still lie buried beneath calcite flows? Or might Tayos have hosted ceremonies so secret that participants took every clue with them into the grave? Even more fringe theories swirl around the cave's darkness. Some have suggested extraterrestrial contact, pointing to alleged electromagnetic anomalies detected in certain chambers, fluctuations in compass readings, and unexplained static in photographic film. Others invoke the Atlantis mythos, speculating that a pre-Incan civilization tunneled here in search of mineral veins, only to vanish beneath the jungle's advance. These ideas stretch the bounds of evidence, yet they underscore an essential truth: that places like Tayos challenge our assumptions about the limits of ancient engineering and the endurance of human memory. In recent years, technological advances have brought new perspectives without relying on legend alone. LiDAR surveys have mapped the terrain above the cave's sinkholes, revealing subtle depressions that hint at collapsed chambers and concealed entrances. Drone-mounted hyperspectral scanners detect mineral anomalies on cave walls, possible traces of pigments once used for ritual painting. And DNA analysis of bat guano has opened windows into past biodiversity, informing us about the ecological history of these caverns. Yet, each scientific breakthrough seems to deepen the mystery. A newly mapped tunnel may lead only to a dead end, while a mineral vein may turn out to be an unremarkable seam. Standing at the rim of the Taos Chasm, headlamp off, we sense the weight of silence pressing in from all sides. The air is cool and damp, charged with the drip of water and the slow creak of stone. The cave's true treasures may not be metallic books or pirates' gold, but the layered echoes of human curiosity and the geological chronicle etched in every wall. What stories do the stalagmites encode in their bands of sediment? Which corridors bear the footprints of lost travelers, and which chambers guard secrets yet unspoken? As we step back into the daylight, the vibrant green canopy regathers around us, the entrance sealing like a portal to another world. The Taos Caves remain a labyrinth of fact and fable, a subterranean realm where science and speculation converge. And so we walk away with questions that resonate in the echo of dripping water. What lies beyond the next bend, waiting to be mapped? Which legends still hover in the darkness, unseen and unheard? And how many chapters of human ingenuity and myth are buried, waiting for the next curious explorer to turn the page? As the damp air of the Ecuadorian highlands gives way to the warm, briny breeze of the Caribbean, we leave the shadowed tunnels of Taos behind and peer beneath the turquoise shallows of Bimini Island. Here, just offshore from a stretch of white sand, lies a submerged avenue of stone blocks, known to many as the Bimini Road. At first glance, the formation appears as a simple alignment of jagged, flat-topped rocks, each measuring a meter or more across, stretching in a remarkably straight line for over 100 meters into the sea. From above, the blocks trace an arrow pointing eastward, their dark silhouettes etched against swaths of pale sand and seagrass. First documented by researchers in 1968, the Bimini Road drew scientific interest for its unusual geometry. Marine geologists noted that the blocks consist of beach rock, lithified carbonate sands cemented by mineral precipitation, common to this part of the Bahamian archipelago. Over millennia, layers of calcite and aragonite encrusted loose sediments, creating horizontal strata that fractured naturally along bedding planes. Under normal conditions, such fractures produce irregular slabs, but at Bimini, the slabs appear organized. Some lie edge to edge, others seemingly fitted at right angles to form orthogonal patterns. What geological processes could yield such apparent masonry beneath the waves? Mainstream explanations point to wave-driven erosion and jointing in beach rock. As sea levels stabilized after the last glacial maximum, around 10,000 BC, the formation of beach rock occurred in intertidal zones, with frequent wetting and drying cycles promoting cementation. Natural joints in the rock, aligned by prevailing stress fields, would have opened along roughly straight lines. Subsequent wave action could dislodge blocks along these joints, leaving linear features on the seafloor where the blocks settled. In this view, the road is simply a coincidence, an alignment of separate but similarly fractured slabs, arranged incidentally by currents and gravity. Yet, for every geological model, the site offers details that defy easy classification. Why do several blocks appear to interlock, their edges abutting with a precision uncommon in purely natural fracture systems? And why is the feature oriented so directly toward the open Atlantic, rather than parallel to the shoreline where beach rock typically forms. Divers mapping the site have recorded sections where blocks overlap like paving stones and clusters that resemble corner junctions. Could wave and current patterns alone account for these configurations? Or is there an element of human design obscured by time and tide? Speculative theories have long surrounded the Bimini Road's identity. In 1969, Edgar Mitchell, astronaut and ocean enthusiast, visited the site and suggested that the stones were remnants of a submerged city, perhaps linked to the legend of Atlantis. Proponents of this view point to Plato's description of an advanced civilization in the mid-Atlantic, imagining that Bimini's blocks are surviving fragments of roads, walls, or quays. Yet, archaeological surveys have uncovered no pottery shards, tool marks, or other artifacts that would indicate large-scale human construction. If these stones once formed part of a coastal settlement, where are the foundations, the midden deposits, or the broken ceramics typical of ancient habitation? A more measured hypothesis considers the possibility of small-scale maritime engineering by pre-Columbian peoples. Could native inhabitants, Arawak or Lucayan, have quarried beach rock to create simple causeways or fish traps, using stone alignments to channel tidal flows and corral fish? Ethnographic records describe indigenous fish weir techniques elsewhere in the Caribbean, but none definitively at Bimini. Moreover, beach rock quarried for human use tends to bear cut marks or tool impressions. The Bimini blocks show none. If human hands shaped these stones, they did so with methods so subtle that only their overall arrangement suggests intention. Turning to subtle, non-anthropogenic forces, researchers have examined subsurface stratigraphy using ground-penetrating sonar. Profiles reveal a shallow layer of unconsolidated sand atop a harder beach rock seam, with the blocks lying at the interface. Some blocks extend downward into crevices, hinting that they may be anchored rather than simply resting on the seabed. Could episodic storms, hurricanes, and winter swells have shifted blocks into positions that mimic a constructed path? Hurricanes are known to move boulders and reshape shorelines dramatically, yet the consistency of Bimini's block alignments over decades of observation suggests a stability unusual for unconsolidated beach stone. Fringe ideas have further embellished the narrative. A few enthusiasts propose that the formation dates to a much earlier era, when sea levels were lower, perhaps 12,000 BC, implying a lost coastal culture whose stoneworks became submerged as the oceans rose. Others imagine that the stones served navigational functions, lighthouses, rudimentary breakwaters, or markers guiding small craft to sheltered inlets. If so, would the stones align with ancient sailing routes or celestial bearings? Some have drawn lines from the Bimini feature to the Florida mainland, suggesting a submerged road or bridge. Yet deeper waters and complex currents make this notion logistically challenging. Recent dives have documented marine life thriving among the blocks, corals, sponges, and algae colonizing their crevices, indicating that the stones have rested undisturbed for centuries. Biologists note that certain corals found here are slow-growing species, requiring decades to establish significant cover. Could the colonization timeline offer clues to the block's age? Radiocarbon dating of encrusting organisms provides lower bounds for when the stones settled, but it cannot confirm whether the blocks fell from above or were originally emplaced in situ. As sunlight filters through the clear water and dances across the stone surfaces, the Bimini Road remains a locus of inquiry and wonder. Its very ambiguity, neither conclusively natural nor demonstrably human-made, invites both careful study and imaginative speculation. What processes can sculpt beach rock into nearly perfect slabs, aligned as if by design? Could remnants of ancient engineering lie hidden beneath layers of sand, waiting to be unearthed by future technology? And might the Bimini Road be a message, encoded in stone, reminding us that nature and humanity often intersect in ways that defy simple explanation. We leave the shallow reef behind, the road's linear forms receding into the bluish haze of depth. The mystery of the Bimini Road endures, poised between rock and sea, beckoning us to return with new tools, fresh questions, and the patient readiness to let the stones speak for themselves. As the patterned stones of Bimini slip beneath the Caribbean waves, our journey carries us eastward, into the arid landscapes of ancient Mesopotamia, where the cradle of civilization still guards secrets beneath its sands. In a quiet corner of Baghdad's National Museum lies an unassuming clay jar, standing no taller than a candlestick. Its weathered surface bears the patina of centuries, a mottled beige flecked with dark mineral stains. Beside it rests a copper cylinder, stained green by verdigris, and within that cylinder, an iron rod, corroded and pitted by time. At first glance, these fragments might be dismissed as mundane pottery shards, but together they form what has come to be called the Baghdad Battery. Excavated in 1938 by German archaeologist Wilhelm König at the site of Kuyut Raboa, just south of Baghdad, the assemblage dates to somewhere between the 2nd century BC and the 3rd century AD, spanning the Parthian and early Sasanian eras. Yet no ancient text describes its purpose, and no companion artifacts have been found in contemporary records. The jar is simple, its clay core fired to a warm terracotta hue. The cylinder fits snugly inside, its rim sealed by asphalt or bitumen, an early waterproofing technique. Inserted through the bitumen is the iron rod, its lower half fashioned to avoid contact with the copper, suspended in what archaeologists presume was once an acidic liquid. Mainstream historians have offered cautious explanations. Some suggest the jars served as storage vessels for sacred scrolls or religious relics, sealed against moisture by the same bitumen that secures the metal parts. Others propose they were simply receptacles for the preservation of foodstuffs or dyes, the metal components serving structural rather than electrical functions. In absence of direct evidence, these interpretations rest on the everyday necessities of ancient life. No electricity required. Yet, when modern scientists filled a similar reconstruction with grape juice or vinegar, liquids rich in acetic acid, the setup produced a steady, if modest, voltage. A handful of volts can drive a current through simple wiring, enough to electroplate a thin layer of metal onto a surface. Could craftsmen in ancient Mesopotamia have used these jars to gild small objects with a fine sheen of silver or gold? Experimental archaeologists have succeeded in plating small copper coins with silver using battery replicas, suggesting a tantalizing link between the jar's design and electrochemical processes. If true, this would mark the Baghdad Battery as an early galvanic cell, perhaps the first known instance of harnessing chemical reactions for useful electrical work. But the evidence remains indirect. No plated artifacts conclusively date to the Parthian or Sasanian periods in Mesopotamia, and the amount of current generated by a single jar is minute. Could ancient artisans have connected multiple jars in series, stacking voltage like the cells of a modern battery? Or did they employ another method to amplify the current, techniques now lost beneath layers of history? Speculative theories, unanchored by hard proof, drift into more extraordinary territory. Some propose that the jars were used for electrotherapy, administering mild shocks for medicinal purposes, a notion that echoes the use of electric fish in Greco-Roman medicine centuries later. Others imagine that early alchemists, experimenting with transformations of metals and liquids, stumbled upon the principles of electrochemistry and encoded their discoveries in these inconspicuous vessels. Could there have been a hidden lineage of knowledge, transmitted through secret guilds, linking Mesopotamian artisans to later innovations in Baghdad's great Islamic Golden Age? More radical voices have even suggested that the Baghdad Battery points to a forgotten era of advanced technology, one that rivaled our own in its understanding of electricity. Yet without written treatises or corroborating artifacts, such ideas remain flights of fancy. Unlike the straightforward function of a Roman aqueduct or the well-documented observatories of medieval Islam, the battery leaves no blueprint, no diagram, no explanatory inscription. Recent analyses have probed deeper. Microscopic examinations of the copper cylinders reveal tool marks consistent with metal smithing techniques of the period, hand hammering and filing rather than high-precision machining. Residue analysis inside the jars detected traces of sulfuric compounds, possibly from fermented grape juice or acidic plant extracts. Ground-penetrating radar at Kuyut Rabua has mapped nearby clay workshops, suggesting that such jars may once have been more common, their metal parts recycled or lost to corrosion. But so far, only a handful of these battery-like assemblies have surfaced, each raising fresh questions about their distribution and use. As we stand before the museum display, its glass reflecting the soft gallery lights, we sense the tension between artifact and interpretation. The Baghdad Battery embodies a crossroads of possibility. A humble clay jar might be nothing more than a sealed container, or it might be the relic of humanity's first experiment with electricity. The motion of ions between copper and iron, mediated by an acidic brew, could have been harnessed for tasks both practical and ceremonial, or it might have been an accidental byproduct of other technologies. What truly transpired in those dusty workshops along the Tigris? Did Parthian potters and metallurgists collaborate in crafting electrochemical devices? Were their jars the secret tools of temple craftsmen seeking lustrous finishes for sacred icons? Or were they experiments in curiosity and alchemy, never refined into widespread use? Perhaps future excavations will uncover chevron patterns of interlinked jars, or inscriptions hinting at the jar's role in sacred rites. Until then, the battery rests in silent testimony to a vanished chapter of human ingenuity. We step back from the display, the cool trade winds of Baghdad's storerooms fading behind us, mindful that some mysteries endure precisely because they refuse easy answers. The Baghdad Battery remains at the intersection of fact and conjecture, its true purpose still concealed within layers of clay, copper, and iron. And so we are left with a question as open as the jar's mouth. What other forgotten technologies lie buried beneath the shifting sands of time, waiting for the curious to unseal their secrets? As the faint hum of electrochemical potential fades from the Baghdad Battery, our path now runs southward along the Jordan Rift, toward a dry, windswept canyon carved by millennia of flash floods. Here, amid the crumbling ruins of Khirbet Qumran in the West Bank of Palestine, explorers in 1952 unearthed an artifact that glimmers not with gold, but with the cold sheen of bronze, a rolled sheet of copper, inscribed with tight rows of text. This is the Copper Scroll, its twisted form carefully uncoiled and preserved behind glass, its surface mottled by oxidation, but still alive with the promise of hidden riches. The scroll measures roughly 2.4 meters in length when unrolled, yet it is composed of 2 strips of copper alloy, riveted for strength. Each line of text is stamped in precise Hebrew characters, detailing locations and quantities of silver, gold, and temple vessels, buried caches strewn across the hills near Jerusalem, Jericho, and Ein Gedi. Unlike the delicate parchment scrolls of Qumran's library, this metallic ledger was designed for permanence, its message meant to survive fire, decay, and the ravages of time. What compulsion drove its authors to record these treasures in bronze rather than ink? Mainstream scholarship places the Copper Scroll's creation around 50 to 100 AD, during the tumultuous years leading up to or following the First Jewish-Roman War. Its scribes seem to have cataloged valuables, thousands of talents of silver and gold, hidden in the ravine of the Valley of Achor, or under the steps of the altar. Yet when modern archaeologists and treasure hunters have followed the scroll's instructions, the earth has yielded only sand and stone. No gold coins gleam in sunlit shafts. No pitchers of temple incense lie waiting in sealed cisterns. Could the scroll have been a diversion? An apocalyptic parable rather than a literal guide? Or did its authors intend that only the initiated, armed with secret landmarks now forgotten, could decrypt its directions? Turning the page, we find that the text refers to locations by cryptic names. In the cavity which is under the side of Hamon Gog, or under the threshing floor which is on the hill of the forest of Sephar. These place names suggest a geography well known to the scroll's compilers, yet they confuse modern scholars. Was the scroll the work of Jerusalem's temple priests fleeing the city, burying the temple treasury to keep it from desecration? Or did a clandestine sect of Qumran celibates hide their own communal stores, preserving wealth for an idealized community yet to return? Scholarly attempts to align the scroll's coordinates with contemporary maps have produced plausible but unproven matches: a cave near Wadi Murabat, a burial chamber in the Sumerian hills, a cistern under a ruined monastery. Some sites yielded pottery shards of the correct era, but no precious metals. Epigraphers labor to reconcile variant measurements, talents of weight versus local measures, and to correct possible transcription errors made by the scroll's copper engravers. Each new hypothesis shifts our understanding but leaves the core mystery intact. Why does a text so precise resist physical verification? Speculative theories press further into the margins of history. A handful of researchers propose that the copper scroll encodes not temple treasures, but ritual objects of an esoteric brotherhood. Books of knowledge, anointed lamps, cups used in secret ceremonies. Others suggest that the scroll was never meant to be followed on the ground. Rather, it was a literary exercise, a didactic allegory warning that earthly wealth is fleeting compared to heavenly reward. In this view, the treasures are spiritual virtues, hidden in the caverns of the soul, awaiting discovery by those who seek true illumination. Fringe voices embrace yet more extraordinary ideas. Some link the scroll to tales of the lost Ark of the Covenant, imagining that the copper text maps the journey of Israel's holiest relic into underground vaults. Others see traces of Gnostic influence, suggesting that the Qumran community harbored secret teachings later suppressed by emerging rabbinic leadership. While such notions attract sensational headlines, they rest on tenuous connections and risk overshadowing the scroll's genuine place in the tapestry of Judean history. Technological advances offer fresh tools without dismissing caution. Ground-penetrating radar surveys in valleys referenced by the scroll have revealed subsurface anomalies, voids and reflections suggestive of man-made chambers. Yet none have been excavated, pending permits and sensitive to the region's political complexities. Digital reconstructions of Qumran's ancient landscape, based on satellite imagery and GIS mapping, attempt to overlay the scroll's coordinates onto modern terrain. But the shifting aridity of the Jordan Rift means that stream courses and vegetation zones have migrated over 2 millennia. As the twilight glow fades in the museum's display hall, the copper scroll's hammered letters stand in silent testimony to a world in upheaval. Priestly families fleeing Rome's advance, desert communities preserving their heritage, scribes confident that what they buried would one day be found. Yet the treasures have not emerged. The scroll's true wealth may lie not in silver or gold, but in the questions it poses. Who authored this enduring ledger? And why did they choose copper over papyrus? What became of the treasures they recorded? Were they recovered and spent? Or do they lie untouched beneath the sands? And how many more secrets, stamped into metal and parchment, still rest hidden in the canyons of history. We step away from the glass case and into the hush of the museum's corridors, aware that the copper scroll occupies a liminal space between fact and faith, archaeology and allegory. In its cryptic lines, we find a mirror of our own search for meaning, tracing maps through time, following clues that refuse to be fully unearthed. And so, as we leave Qumran's legacy behind, we carry with us an open question, resonating in the silent chambers of our curiosity. What other stories lie locked in bronze, waiting for the next hand brave enough to turn the key? As the echoes of ancient bronze letters fade from Qumran's dusty halls, our journey now carries us northward, across the deserts of Egypt to the banks of the Nile, where the Temple of Hathor at Dendera rises in vast symmetry under the scorching sun. Here, within an inner sanctuary carved from pink granite and lofty stone blocks, a series of reliefs sketched in ochre and black catch the light, long tubular shapes capped at each end, cradling sinuous snakes. These panels, often called the Dendera Light, have intrigued travelers since the temple's rediscovery in the early 19th century. The Temple of Hathor itself dates to the Ptolemaic period, built between 125 BC and AD 60 by Greek rulers who embraced Egyptian cults. Its hypostyle hall, towering columns hewn with lotus and papyrus motifs, leads to a darkened chamber where these curious reliefs are set high on the walls. One scene shows the god Harsamtus emerging from what appears to be an elongated bulb, the serpent's body coiling within. Adjacent, priests hold what some describe as cables or rods leading toward an unseen source. What could these images mean? Mainstream Egyptologists interpret the reliefs as symbolic representations of creation myths. The Dendera Light is understood not as a lamp, but as a lotus flower whose stalk contains a serpent, an icon of rebirth and divine birth. The bulb shape is actually the lotus blossom, cradling the serpent form of Harsamtus, the youthful aspect of Horus. The priest's staffs represent ritual implements, guiding the divine child toward the womb of the goddess. These motifs align with centuries of Egyptian art, where gods emerge from papyrus reeds or lotus blooms, and where serpents embody primordial energy. Yet, when modern visitors shine torches on the reliefs, the shapes take on an uncanny resemblance to the incandescent bulbs of our own age, bulbous bases tapering into long tubes. The absence of soot in the temple's inner chambers has fueled speculation. If these were lamps, why is there no residue on the stone ceilings? Could the Egyptians have mastered a technology that enclosed flame, or even an electrical arc, within sealed vessels? And if so, why did this knowledge vanish without leaving any trace in the papyri or in wider architectural practice? Speculative theories have long dreamed of electric temples, where priests harnessed voltaic power from large ceramic vessels, analogous to Baghdad batteries, to illuminate subterranean chambers. Proponents imagine hidden wires snaking through stone conduits, powering glowing devices whose light remained steady and safe in a humid, oil-coated environment. Could an ancient civilization have discovered the principle of preventing air from extinguishing a flame, encasing it behind glass or clay? Yet no shards of glass, electrodes, or power sources have ever been unearthed at Dendera. Turning from technology to ritual, other voices propose that the reliefs were a coded map of esoteric initiation rites. The light symbols, they argue, represent stages of spiritual illumination rather than physical lamps. Initiates passed through successive chambers, dark, torchlit, and finally sunlit, mirroring the journey of Harsamtus from bulb to sky. In this view, the serpentine tubes trace pathways of cosmic energy, guiding the soul through the underworld and into rebirth under Hathor's benevolent gaze. More fringe interpretations weave the Dendera Light into broader Atlantis legends, suggesting that this was a surviving schematic of pre-dynastic technology, preserved by priestly lineages who feared its misuse. Some even point to Roman-era graffiti in nearby sandstone quarries, claiming that early engineers scavenged these lamp plans to design primitive oil lamps. Yet archaeological records show only conventional oil lamps, terracotta vessels with simple wicks found in tombs and temples across Egypt. Recent studies have approached the reliefs with fresh tools of analysis. High-resolution photogrammetry has mapped every groove and incised line, revealing tool marks consistent with chisels used elsewhere in the temple. No evidence of heat staining or thermal degradation appears on the stone, supporting the mainstream view that these were ritual images, not functional devices. Chemical swabs from the relief surfaces detect traces of pigments, red ochre and black carbon, applied deliberately for visibility in flickering torchlight. Meanwhile, laser scanning of the chamber's acoustics shows that prayers and hymns uttered beneath the reliefs resonate with unusual clarity, suggesting that the room's design optimized sound as well as symbolism. Could the light be as much about the spiritual illumination of congregants as about physical brightness? In this light, the tubular motifs become conduits of sound and blessing, their lines guiding both sight and voice in a synchronized rite. Yet, for all these insights, the Dendera Light retains its power to provoke questions. Why, among hundreds of temple reliefs, do only these panels adopt this bulb and snake form? Did the iconography evolve from earlier, simpler lotus and serpent images, adapting to Ptolemaic tastes and foreign influences? And why are there no corresponding texts, in hieroglyphic hymns or Greek inscriptions, that explain the purpose of these carvings? Standing in the dim corridor, gazing up at the high panels, we feel the weight of centuries pressing down. A world where gods emerged from flowers, where light was a metaphor for divine presence, and where technology and myth often walked hand in hand. The reliefs invite us to ask, what boundary separates symbolic art from technical manual? Could a civilization's most profound wisdom be encoded in imagery that only reveals its depths to those who know where and how to look? And so, as we step back into the dazzling Egyptian sun, leaving Hathor's temple behind, we carry with us a lingering glow of curiosity. The Dendera Light may never beam with real photons in our reconstructions, but its carved contours continue to shine with the reflections of human imagination. What other secrets lie sealed in the stones of ancient sanctuaries, waiting for the patient gaze that can see beyond the obvious? As the carved sanctuaries of Dendera recede behind us, our journey carries us north across Europe's gentle hills to a grassy slope in Oxfordshire, England, where a figure both ancient and alive unfolds across the chalky turf. On the flank of White Horse Hill, the Uffington White Horse stretches some 110 meters in length, its body rendered in sweeping curves and angular lines carved into the underlying chalk. From below, it appears as a stark silhouette against the horizon. From the crest, its sinuous form coils like a great spirit, beckoning us to ponder the hands that first shaped it. Careful excavation and optically stimulated luminescence dating place the horse's origin around 1400 BC, late in Britain's Bronze Age, though some researchers argue for a later carving, perhaps in the Iron Age around 500 BC. Either way, its enduring white glow owes to centuries of bleaching rains and spring recuttings, each generation renewing the chalk outline. Yet the figure's true purpose remains elusive. Was it a tribal emblem, marking the territory of a warrior society that revered the horse's speed and strength? Or did it serve a ritual function, watched over by druids who saw the creature as a guardian spirit bridging earth and sky? Mainstream archaeology often sees the Uffington horse in its wider landscape context. Nearby lies the ancient hilltop fortress of Uffington Castle, with its Iron Age ramparts commanding views across the Vale of White Horse. To the south, the prehistoric burial mound of Wayland's smithy crowns a ridge, a long barrow aligned east-west, its stones echoing myths of the smith god who bestowed gifts upon weary travelers. Together, these sites form a ceremonial complex. The horse, perhaps the emblematic guide for processions between shrine and fortress, a symbol woven into pathways of pilgrimage under changing seasons. Yet when we stand on the upland grass in dawn's first light, the horse's head seems to bow in contemplation. Overhead, larks spiral aloft, their song dissolving into the morning haze. It is here that fringe theories gather momentum. Some suggest the figure served as a celestial map, its proportions mirroring the constellation Pegasus, visible high in the western sky during midsummer. Might the Bronze Age carvers have tracked stellar patterns, embedding cosmic alignments in chalk ink for all who watched the heavens? Other voices, more speculative still, imagine the white horse as a marker for subterranean tunnels, underground channels linking Wayland's smithy to the hill fort, crossing beneath the horse's haunches. Local legends speak of hidden passages, sealed by time, once trodden by smiths bearing iron gifts from deep earth. Could the chalk cuts above hint at long-lost doorways, their shapes encoded in the horse's limbs? Scientific surveys have tested some of these notions without dismissing the horse's aura of mystery. LiDAR imaging reveals subtle earthworks around the figure, banks and ditches that may mark earlier phases of carving or enclosure. Geochemical analyses of chalk cores taken along the horse's edge show layers of compacted sediment, indicating repeated maintenance events spaced by centuries. Yet none of these methods can tell us why Bronze Age people chose this form, or what rituals unfolded upon its spine. Folklore adds further layers to the tale. On certain midsummer nights, villagers have claimed to see the horse's chalk glowing under moonlight, as if imbued with otherworldly radiance. In the early 20th century, antiquarian William Stukeley recorded tales of a spectral horse galloping across the downs, its hooves striking sparks from hidden flints. Are these stories mere romantic echoes, or do they preserve memories of ceremonies long since abandoned? Fire-based rites held to renew the chalk lines and reinvigorate the horse's protective spirit. Turning our gaze to the horse's slender legs, we notice that the hind limb arches backward in a manner unlike natural equine anatomy, a stylistic choice that emphasizes motion, perhaps symbolizing the horse's passage through time rather than through space. Some art historians liken this abstraction to continental European motifs, suggesting cultural exchange between Bronze Age Britain and the Atlantic seaboard. Did itinerant craftspeople bring stories of sun chariots and solar steeds, adapting them to local chalk? As clouds drift across the sky, the figure's edges shimmer between bright white and muted gray, reminding us that the horse exists in a dynamic balance of light and shadow. Conservationists now oversee careful trimming of the turf and the removal of invasive brush, mindful that modern interventions must honor centuries of tradition. Even these efforts echo ancient practices. Each spring, villagers would have rallied to scour the chalk, piercing winter's gloom with fresh cuts, a communal act reinforcing identity and connection to the land. Yet for all our surveys and folklore, the white horse remains a cipher. Does its location, visible for miles across rolling pastures, declare dominion or invite passage? Do its abstract lines channel ancestral power, or simply celebrate the horse itself as a companion of charioteers and plowmen alike? And what did the first onlookers feel, staring up at this dazzling shape carved by human hands, their metal sickle-age tools brushing white chalk into form? Standing at the crest, we hear only the whisper of grasses and the distant bleat of sheep, as if the land itself has grown silent to protect its secret. The Uffington white horse endures as both landscape and symbol, its meaning etched as deeply into our collective imagination as it is into the chalk beneath our feet. And so, as we step onward down the Ridgeway path, we carry with us the horse's quiet question. What stories lie buried beneath those chalky strokes, waiting for the next seeker to follow the line and uncover the mysteries of an age lost to time? As the ancient chalk lines of Uffington's white horse fade behind us, our journey presses on, this time to the scattered ruins of Roman forts and villas across the northwestern frontier of the empire. Here, amid the crumbling stones and wind-whipped grasses of Hadrian's Wall country, metal detectorists and antiquarians alike have uncovered small, hollow bronze objects, dodecahedra, each face a perfect pentagon pierced by a circular hole, with knobs at every vertex. These Roman dodecahedra range in size from 6 to 20 centimeters, their surfaces patinated to a soft green or deep brown, the hollow interiors echoing lightly when tapped. At first glance, they appear as curious geometric playthings, miniature sculptures slipped through the ages to confound us now. Over 100 of these dodecahedra have been found across the empire, from Gaul to the Danube, from the Rhineland to distant sites in the Balkans, but never with an accompanying inscription or context that reveals their purpose. Some were tucked into graves as funerary goods, others surfaced in villa courtyards or near fort ramparts. The uniformity of design, 12 faces, 20 vertices, 30 edges, suggests a shared workshop tradition, yet local variations in size and hole diameter hint at regional adaptations. Were these objects utilitarian tools or the playthings of bored legionaries with a penchant for geometry? Mainstream scholars have proposed a range of practical uses. One leading theory suggests they served as surveying instruments. By inserting a rod through two opposite holes and sighting along it, a Roman engineer could measure angles or establish consistent distances. Were they early theodolites, guiding the layout of roads and fortifications with Pythagorean precision? Experimental archaeologists have attempted simple measurements with replica dodecahedra, finding that certain hole pairs approximate useful angles, perhaps aiding in the construction of windows that admitted light at specific times of day. Another common hypothesis sees the dodecahedron as a form of candle holder. When placed over a flame, the multiple openings would cast a geometric pattern of light and shadow across temple walls or banquet halls. Did wealthy Romans, eager to display mathematical sophistication, use these bronze forms to animate evening gatherings? Yet the absence of soot deposits or heat discoloration on known examples weakens this idea. If they once held candles, their owners cared enough to keep them unusually clean. Knitting tools represent a third mainstream suggestion. Some researchers note that the varying hole sizes correspond closely to the diameters of Roman knitting needles recovered elsewhere, implying that the dodecahedra functioned as gauge guides for gloves or hose. Could women in frontier provinces have worked fine wool crafts, passing yarn spindles through these holes to maintain uniform stitch sizes? While this theory aligns with discoveries of knitted fragments at Vindolanda, it relies on circumstantial connections between objects found miles apart. Beyond these utilitarian explanations, more speculative interpretations have entered the conversation. A handful of historians propose that the dodecahedra were ritual objects used by augurs or soothsayers. The 12 faces might symbolize the months of the lunar year or the zodiac signs, while the knobs represent planetary spheres. Were priests of Jupiter or Mithras rotating these forms to divine omens, interpreting the position of small pins dropped onto a table as messages from the gods? No ancient text references such a practice, yet the geometric purity of the dodecahedron would have resonated with philosophical circles steeped in Platonic thought. Fringe theories take us deeper into the realm of the extraordinary. Some writers claim that the dodecahedra encode advanced astronomical knowledge, perhaps used to calculate the precession of the equinoxes or to mark solstitial alignments. Others suggest they formed part of a mechanical, analog computer, an idea popularized by the Antikythera Mechanism's discovery. In this vision, Roman artisans combined metalworking skill and mathematical insight to craft devices that could predict celestial events. Yet if such knowledge existed, why did it leave so little trace beyond these silent bronzes? Material analysis brings fresh, if inconclusive, perspectives. Non-destructive X-ray fluorescence scans reveal that the bronze alloy varies from one fine spot to another, some rich in tin, others in lead, indicating different foundries or recycled metal sources. Surface wear patterns, mapped with 3D microscopy, show that some holes bear polished rims, as if repeatedly handled or threaded with cords. Could these patterns reflect a handheld device, jangled by soldiers on the march, rather than a stationary temple ornament? Yet the knobs, each shaped into smooth hemispheres, show little sign of gripping, undermining theories of routine, heavy use. Contextual archaeology offers further clues, but also fresh questions. A recent excavation at a fort near Nijmegen uncovered a dodecahedron alongside a set of surveying tools, plumb bobs, measuring rods, and graduated dials. The proximity suggests a connection, yet the rod and hole alignment falls short of precise right angles needed for accurate sighting. Meanwhile, at a villa in Provence, a dodecahedron lay amid fragments of glass lampware, reigniting thoughts of luminous uses. Are we glimpsing multiple functions? An object that could serve practical measurement one day and sacred illumination the next? Even the dodecahedron's mathematical elegance raises its own mystery. Plato, writing in the 4th century BC, associated the dodecahedron with the shape of the universe, the fifth entity beyond the four classical elements. Did Roman engineers share this cosmological symbolism, embedding it into everyday objects? Or did they simply enjoy the challenge of casting 12-faced forms, an artisanal display of skill that conferred status upon its possessor? Standing before a display of these bronzes in a museum's subdued lighting, we sense their deliberate ambiguity. They beckon us to ask, what was more valuable to Roman hands, the practical tool or the symbolic icon? How did provincial craftsmen learn to cast such complex shapes without the precision molds of later centuries? And above all, why has no single unifying source ever been found to explain their existence? As dusk falls over the stone walls and grassy ramparts of the Roman frontier, the dodecahedra's hollow forms remain resolutely mute. They are vessels of inquiry, their 12 faces reflecting our own desire to map the unknown. And so we step away from their glass cases, carrying with us an echo of their unanswered questions. What secrets did these objects truly hold? And what other artifacts, locked in bronze or buried in sand, await rediscovery to illuminate the shadowed corners of antiquity? As the hollow bronze echoes of Roman dodecahedra fade from our minds, we now journey southward, across the savannas of eastern Africa, where granitic hills rise like ancient watchtowers above the horizon. Nestled between these hills, amid the red earth and acacia scrub, lie the weathered remains of Great Zimbabwe. From a distance, the ruins present as undulating lines of dry stone walls and looming enclosures. Up close, each stone appears meticulously placed, its smooth face worn by centuries of wind and footsteps. Built by the Shona people between roughly AD 1100 and 1450, Great Zimbabwe was the heart of a powerful kingdom whose influence radiated across the subcontinent. The largest enclosure, known today as the Great Enclosure, boasts walls over 5 meters high and more than 250 meters in circumference, erected without mortar, each stone balanced in careful harmony. Narrow passageways wind between the walls, creating a labyrinth that hints at both ceremony and defense. Within the ruins stand carved soapstone birds, Enigmatic feathered figures perched atop monoliths, their meaning lost to time but their presence inviting contemplation. Mainstream archaeology identifies Great Zimbabwe as a royal city and trading hub. Excavations have unearthed thousands of pottery sherds, some adorned with distinctive incised patterns, and a wealth of imported goods, Chinese porcelain dating to the Yuan dynasty, Arabian glass beads, and Persian ceramics. These finds testify to a vast Indian Ocean network that funneled goods and ideas into the inland plateau. Local artisans quarried granite using stone mauls and chisels, while craftsmen fashioned intricate gold jewelry, suggesting the realm's wealth derived from both mining and mercantile enterprise. Yet, even as we piece together the city's economic foundations, mysteries remain etched in its stones. What precisely guided the layout of the curving walls? Were they drawn to cosmic alignments, channeling the moon's path, or the sun's solstice rays through hidden apertures? Some researchers have noted that the great enclosure's windows frame the morning sun during the winter solstice, hinting at a ritual dimension tied to celestial cycles. Could these architectural gestures reflect a cosmology as rich as any temple in the ancient world? Another puzzle lies in the abrupt decline of Great Zimbabwe in the 15th century. No conquest records mark its fall. Instead, the city appears to have been gradually abandoned. Was a shift in trade routes, favoring ports to the north, responsible for its decline? Did climatic changes, such as prolonged droughts, force the population to disperse? Or did internecine strife and dynastic disputes erode the kingdom from within? The silence of the stone halls offers no clear answer. Speculative theories have woven their own threads into this tapestry of ruins. Some suggest that Great Zimbabwe was the true seat of the legendary kingdom of Ophir, famed in biblical texts for its wealth in gold. If traders carried gold dust and nuggets northward into the Middle East, could they have passed through these very corridors? Others propose that the stone birds once held scrolls or codices, their hollow bodies serving as repositories for sacred texts now lost. While no physical trace of writing survives, the bird's serene gaze implies guardianship over hidden knowledge. Fringe interpretations venture into more extraordinary terrain. A handful of writers argue that the smooth curves of the walls echo advanced engineering techniques, perhaps influenced by a pre-existing civilization whose memory was absorbed into Shona oral tradition. Some even hint at extraterrestrial guidance, citing the precision of the dry stone construction as beyond the capabilities of 12th century technology. While such ideas find popular audiences, they rest on conjecture rather than the material evidence so carefully sifted from the mounds of ash and clay. Recent technological mapping has added nuance to our understanding without settling the overarching enigmas. LiDAR surveys reveal subsurface foundations beyond the visible enclosures, smaller stone circles and hut platforms suggesting a wider urban sprawl. Ground-penetrating radar has detected buried pathways linking Great Zimbabwe to satellite settlements, hinting at a hierarchical network of villages feeding into the capital. But even as these hidden features emerge, the purpose of certain spaces, an isolated chamber with a smoothly plastered floor, a triangular alcove facing east, remains open to interpretation. Oral traditions among the modern Shona people preserve echoes of the city's grandeur. Folktales tell of a king so wise that he could speak with elephants, and of a queen whose silk robes dazzled foreign envoys. Elders still chant the names of vanished kings, Mutota, Matope, whose stones bear silent witness to their reigns. Yet these stories seldom connect directly to the architectural record, weaving metaphor and history into patterns as intricate as the incised pottery designs found in the debris. As the late afternoon sun gilds the granite walls, the soapstone birds cast long, elegant shadows across the red dust. We walk the gentle curves of the great enclosure, our footsteps stirring small clouds of earth. Each stone seems to hold a question: who laid it in place, and for what ceremony or decree? What murmurs once echoed under the moonlight between these ramparts, and which treasures, be they metal, manuscript, or memory, lie still buried beneath the rising wild grasses? Leaving the ruins behind, we carry with us the resonance of human ambition etched onto the landscape. Great Zimbabwe stands both as a monument to the ingenuity of its builders and as a puzzle inviting every generation to add its interpretation. What other secrets lie concealed in those silent chambers and winding walls? And how might the next discovery illuminate the shadowed corners of this lost kingdom's story? As the last echoes of Great Zimbabwe's weathered walls fade into the twilight, we turn our gaze to a very different treasure, one buried not in stone but in lead, hidden within the caves above Granada. In a dimly lit chamber of Sacromonte, narrow shafts of light filter through cracks in the rock, illuminating a leather-bound tome? No, rows of small rectangular tablets, each bearing inscriptions in delicate, inscribed Arabic script. These are the lead books of Sacromonte, nearly 200 tinned copper and lead folios, its pages stamped with verses in Latin, Arabic, and a mysterious hybrid tongue. Their battered covers and corroded surfaces seem to hum with centuries of silence. Discovered in the late 16th century by Mozarabic friars beneath layers of cave earth, the lead books arrived at a turbulent moment in Spain's history. The Moriscos, Muslims who had ostensibly converted to Christianity, still harbored cultural memories of Al-Andalus. According to local lore, a shepherd stumbled on a sealed niche, its lid sealed by mortar. Inside lay the books, wrapped in animal hide and tied with rusted wire. The friars carried them down to Granada's archbishop, who placed them in a special chamber, certain that these pages might bridge the rift between faiths, or expose dangerous heresy. At first glance, the texts appear to recount the lives of the prophets, Adam and Eve, Noah, Abraham, consistent with the Quran's narratives yet tinged with local color. One folio names Granada's own founder as a descendant of Abraham. Another describes a Sancta Maria, whose lineage mirrors both Christian and Islamic traditions. Layers of marginal notes in Andalusi script suggest scribes returned to the texts across generations, interpreting and glossing each line. But the book's lead alloy, an unusual choice for manuscripts, raises the first of many questions. Why inscribe scripture on metal, a medium more durable than parchment but far heavier? Were these volumes intended as altarpieces, meteor-proof archives, or ritual objects meant to outlast the flames of Inquisition? Mainstream scholars have approached the lead books with cautious skepticism. Detailed paleographic analysis dates many inscriptions to the late 16th and early 17th centuries after the fall of Granada in 1492. Metallurgical studies confirm that the lead contains trace elements consistent with Iberian smelting practices of that era. Some argue the books were a cunning fabrication, an effort by Moriscos or crypto-Muslims to assert a hidden heritage under the guise of shared scripture. The Catholic authorities, uneasy with their ambiguous theology, ultimately condemned many volumes as forgeries, banning their display and restricting scholarly access. Yet the books themselves refuse to be dismissed so easily. Several exhibit layers of micro-etching, a process of successive strokes requiring painstaking labor. Ink residues, detected by advanced spectroscopy, show that some pages were once tinted with henna or saffron dyes, uncommon for lead objects. Could these have been used in clandestine ceremonies, their pages unrolled like liturgy for secret congregations deep in the cave's recesses? And what of the pages that bear numbers, diagrams, and geometric patterns, charts that resemble early attempts at lunar calendars or astrological tables? Were these simply scribal embellishments, or vestiges of a lost Andalusi science of timekeeping? Among the more speculative lines of inquiry is the suggestion that the lead books encode a syncretic gospel, one that unites Christian and Islamic revelation into a single, universal faith. Advocates point to passages where Jesus the Messiah is referred to by both titles and honorifics drawn from the Quran and the Gospels. Does this reflect a genuine theological bridge crafted by Mozarabic communities yearning for reconciliation? Or was it a deliberate ruse, an attempt to curry favor with Christian rulers while preserving Islamic identity and code? Fringe theories deepen the mystery. Some propose that the books trace their lineage to a hidden Umayyad enclave that survived the Reconquista, descendants of the caliphs who once ruled Al-Andalus, preserving secret libraries of wisdom beneath the Sierra Nevada. Others see connections to Gnostic or Hermetic traditions, suggesting the copper and lead pages served as amulets, their inscriptions granting protection or worldly power to initiates. According to a persistent but undocumented legend, one volume contains a map to buried treasure. Jars of gold coins hidden beneath a ruined mosque now vanished under modern Granada's streets. Recent technological advances offer fresh insights, though they rarely settle the debate. High-resolution 3D scanning has revealed tool marks that hint at least 3 distinct hands, each with its own stroke pattern, suggesting the books were compiled in stages rather than in a single commission. Isotope analysis of the organic fibers in the hide bindings traces them to both North African and Iberian livestock, reflecting a trans-Mediterranean trade in raw materials. Meanwhile, digital linguistics has parsed the hybrid text, identifying dozens of unique graphemes, characters that align neither with classical Arabic nor with medieval Castilian. Are these chimeric letters a scribal cipher, a private shorthand devised to conceal sensitive doctrine? Archaeological excavations in Sacromonte's cave network have turned up fragments of ceramic devotional cups, bodmed, narrow-waisted vessels glossed in cobalt blue, stamped with crescents and crosses. These cups, too, blend Christian and Islamic motifs, suggesting that the cave complex served as a pilgrimage site for centuries after the fall of Granada. Could the lead books have functioned as liturgical manuals for cave congregations, their metal pages resistant to damp, hidden beneath dripping vaults, emerging only at appointed times? As we step from the shadowed cave into the bright Andalusian sun, the lead books remain both artifact and allegory, heavy with history and thick with mystery. They invite us to ask, who truly composed these volumes, and for what secret purpose? Were they forgeries of survival, coded messages of resistance, or sincere attempts at religious fusion? And what other buried pages, etched in durable metals, might still lie forgotten in caves and crypts across the Mediterranean, waiting for intrepid seekers to unveil their cryptic truths? As the faint echo of Sacromonte's leaden tomes fades from our ears, we turn our gaze southward, across the desert sands of Egypt, toward a mystery whispered by Herodotus himself, the lost Labyrinth. Imagine standing on the edge of Lake Moeris, the ancient waters glimmering beneath a pale blue sky. Before you rises the brick-lined pyramid of Amenemhat III at Hawara, its battered stones hinting at a grandeur long eroded. But it is not the pyramid that draws your curiosity, but the sprawling remains of a vast mortuary complex, now buried beneath millennia of Nile silt, said to contain a labyrinth so intricate that even the wisest could lose their way. Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BC, described a structure larger and more wonderful than the pyramids, with 12 covered courts and 3,000 rooms, half above ground, half below. He claimed no stranger dared venture beyond the outer courts alone, lest they never emerge. Strabo and Pliny echoed these marvels, their words painting a picture of columns of white stone, chambers adorned with statues, and passages that wound in bewildering patterns. Yet centuries of explorers returned to dusty encampments empty-handed. their shovels revealing only broken column drums and scattered foundations. Archaeology tells a more modest tale. Excavations led by British engineer Flinders Petrie in the late 19th century uncovered a labyrinthine funerary temple adjoining Amenemhat's pyramid, a series of pillared halls and subsidiary chapels aligned along a central axis. Petrie's plan revealed corridors flanked by chapels dedicated to each nome, province of Egypt, a ritual map of the kingdom itself. Here, priests performed rites to sustain the king's ka, drawing on the Nile's life-giving waters and the cyclical rhythms of the cosmos. Yet no subterranean maze matching Herodotus's awe-inspiring account emerged. Was the Great Labyrinth simply the temple's vast scale distorted by over-enthusiastic storytelling? As we peer deeper into the desert floor, modern techniques add nuance. Ground-penetrating radar surveys outline walls hidden beneath sand, suggesting annexes and subsidiary rooms whose purpose remains unclear. Aerial LiDAR scans hint at geometric patterns, rectangular courtyards and angled passages that disappear under cultivation. Each new remnant invites fresh questions. Did the mortuary temple once extend further, its outer courts swallowed by the changing course of Lake Morris? Could the famed underground galleries lie yet undetected beneath layers of alluvium? Venturing beyond mainstream explanations, some scholars propose that the Lost Labyrinth was not a single structure, but a composite of monuments across the Fayum oasis. From the pyramid at Hawara to the funerary enclosure at Lisht, a network of ceremonial sites might have formed a ritual circuit, an open-air labyrinth of processional routes and canal-lined causeways. In this view, no single visitor could ever fully traverse the maze, for its pathways spanned kilometers of sacred landscape. Was Herodotus's labyrinth a literary compression of a vast sacred topography? Speculative theories dance on the edge of legend. A handful of voices suggest secret chambers carved beneath pharaonic foundations, escape tunnels or emergency sanctuaries for royal priests. Could hidden stairways descend into natural caverns, their entrances concealed by false walls and plaster? Ancient quarry tunnels in nearby escarpments hint at subterranean corridors used to extract limestone for pyramid blocks. Were these ad hoc passageways later incorporated into ritual architecture, transforming practical minds into sanctified mazes? Then there are the fringe notions that beckon with their allure. Some enthusiasts link the labyrinth to the mythical lands of Atlantis, imagining that lost currents of pre-dynastic culture left behind vast complexes whose original plans inspired later Egyptian builders. Others invoke esoteric mathematics, noting that labyrinthine patterns appear in Cretan and Minoan sites, and suggesting an ancient Mediterranean exchange of architectural ideas. If such cross-cultural links existed, might the Hawara complex be a distant descendant of Bronze Age palatial labyrinths, reinterpreted under solar and funerary symbolism? Yet for all these threads, the labyrinth resists certainty. The silt-laden margins of Lake Morris have shifted over time. What was once a thriving canal network is now farmland, making precise mapping a Herculean task. Local folklore tells of villagers unearthing gypsum-coated bricks and fragments of painted reliefs, only to see them reburied by encroaching dunes. Each fragment hints at ornate decoration, lotus columns, falcon-headed capitals, and scenes of the king's journey through the underworld. But with every shard recovered and then lost to time, the labyrinth's true form remains tantalizingly out of reach. Standing on the eroded causeway leading to the mortuary temple, we imagine the torchlit ceremonies of yesteryear, the chanting priests processing through colonnades, the scent of incense mingling with the desert breeze. We envision strangers entering the complex under the watchful eyes of temple guardians, their flickering lamps illuminating stone walls carved with spells to guide the deceased. Which passages led to hidden shrines, which turned abruptly to confound, and which opened onto chambers of shimmering alabaster pillars. As the sun dips low and the horizon blurs into golden haze, the lost labyrinth at Hawara becomes more than an architectural curiosity. It embodies the tension between what we uncover and what remains buried. Each new study, each cautious trench, reveals foundations and floor mosaics, yet the larger puzzle endures. Was the labyrinth an epic funerary temple whose scale outstripped all others, or a composite symbol woven from many sites? Did secret corridors lie concealed beneath its halls? Or did the true maze exist only in the minds of those who built it? And so, as we retrace our steps along the ancient causeway, our footprints stirring chalky dust, we carry with us the echo of unanswered questions. What lies beneath the sands of Hawara, waiting for patient hands and modern instruments to reveal its contours? Which hidden chambers have collapsed beyond hope and which remain miraculously intact, waiting for the day when the desert finally yields its deepest secret? As the shifting sands of Hawara's lost labyrinth give way to the mysteries of the deep, our journey carries us from sunlit ruins to the silent expanse of the Southern Ocean. Imagine standing aboard the research vessel Eltanin in August 1964, the ship's winches rattling as a plume of sediment drifts from the ocean floor. 800 miles off the tip of South America, at a depth of over 4,000 meters, the crew's sonar operators caught sight of an object unlike any they had mapped before. A mast-like structure rising from the abyss, slender and curved, flanked by a horizontal bar, like an antenna pointing skyward in the world below. Photographs captured by the Eltanin's deep-sea camera reveal a mysterious formation, a smooth, tubular shaft perhaps half a meter tall, topped by a crosspiece with its ends flared slightly upward. The surrounding seafloor is littered with sediment slides and debris, evidence of turbidity currents that sweep the abyssal plain. Yet this object stands upright, isolated and precise. In the monochrome stills, it resembles a piece of human technology dropped into a realm of pressure and cold light where no cables or wiring could survive. Mainstream marine geologists quickly offered a prosaic explanation. The so-called Eltanin Antenna is not an artifact of human manufacture, but a living organism or a trace fossil. Some identified it as the skeleton of a carnivorous sponge, Cladorhiza concrescens, whose branching structure can appear almost architectural. Others noted its resemblance to the burrow casts of polycate worms or the root structures of deep-sea oases of coral and xenophyophores. In these discussions, the antenna's rigid posture is explained by mineralization, silicon and calcium compounds that cement biological tissues into stone-like forms over millennia. Yet, if we peer closer at the black and white frames, we see that the flared ends bear parallel grooves, regular ridges that suggest deliberate shaping rather than organic growth. The central shaft appears unnaturally smooth, tapering evenly as if turned on a lathe. Could deep currents have polished a natural outcrop into this shape? Or might metal incrustation left by an ancient shipwreck have sculpted the form? The abyssal plains are littered with the detritus of cruising vessels, tools, anchors, even pieces of cargo, swept from decks by storms. Yet no other debris appears alongside the antenna. How did a solitary mast come to rest here, untouched by scavengers or snags? Speculative currents whirl around the antenna's origin. A handful of voices suggest that the structure is a remnant of a lost civilization, an Atlantean beacon fashioned of bronze or stone intended to transmit energy across the seas. In this view, the antenna is one of many underwater markers, scattered like silent sentinels awaiting rediscovery. Others imagine its purpose as scientific, perhaps an ancient oceanographic device, measuring currents or depths long before modern instrumentation? If so, where are the companion instruments, recording chambers, lead-lined boxes, or anchor weights? More fringe theories embrace extraterrestrial intervention. The antenna's resemblance to terrestrial radio masts, complete with a Y-shaped crossbar, has fueled speculation that alien probes landed in the abyss, leaving behind elements of their communication arrays. Could these structures be testaments to off-world visitors surveying Earth's oceans? Advocates of this idea point to the absence of any known geological process that yields such symmetry and regularity at depth. Yet the absence of accompanying debris, no portholes, no inscriptions, remains a challenge to this interpretation. Recent advances in deep-sea exploration offer new perspectives. Modern remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, equipped with high-definition cameras and manipulator arms could revisit the site, sampling material for geochemical analysis and capturing 3D scans of the formation. If the antenna is indeed a siliceous sponge, microscopic examination would reveal the characteristic spicules and cellular textures unique to deep-sea porifera. If it is a worm-cast formation, sediment granulometry and trace element profiles would match known polycate burrows. Yet no such follow-up mission has been conducted, perhaps deterred by the site's remote location and the vast costs of oceanic research. Turning our gaze back to the sediment-stirred photographs, we notice a faint circle of disturbed mud at the antenna's base, like the halo of a sedimentary footprint. Could this mark the spot where a strong current toppled other structures, leaving only this one standing? Or does it suggest that the object was intentionally embedded, wedged into the mud to withstand abyssal storms? Abyssal creatures such as sea urchins and brittle stars often anchor themselves by burrowing, yet their bioturbation leaves no coherent pattern. The mystery remains. What force set this singular tower into the ocean floor with such resilience? As the Eltanin steamed on into the night, the antenna receded from view, its image preserved only in grainy snapshots. It became a footnote in oceanographic literature, a curiosity among many, yet never fully explained. Today's researchers, scanning acoustical profiles for mid-ocean ridges and hydrothermal vents, may pass unknowingly above the site, unaware of the silent rod standing sentinel in the darkness below. We emerge from the deep's shadow with a question as open as the ocean itself. What other enigmas lie submerged on the abyssal plains, waiting for the next expedition's lights and cameras? Could the Eltanin Antenna be but one of a series of mysterious formations, each with its own story of origin? Organic, geological, or perhaps beyond either? As we cast our minds back to that winter night in 1964, when the Eltanin sonar first picked up its signal, we remember that beneath the waves, the world is still largely unread, its greatest wonders and strangest artifacts remaining submerged, beyond the reach of casual discovery. As the solitary antenna of the abyss recedes into memory, our journey returns to the surface world, this time into the hushed galleries of Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library. There, behind protective glass, lies a manuscript page whose pale vellum crackles with centuries of secrets. The Vinland Map. Faint brown lines sketch coastlines with the precision of a navigator's hand, while vibrant washes of blue-green pigment fill rivers and bays. Latin inscriptions label terrae incognita, unknown lands, among them Vinlanda Insula, positioned off the western edge of Greenland. The map's edges curl slightly, as if beckoning us to peer beyond what was once thought possible. First revealed to scholars in 1965, the Vinland Map promised to rewrite the story of European contact with North America. While the celebrated Icelandic sagas record Norse voyages to a land they called Vinland around AD 1000, no contemporary map had ever borne witness to those voyages, until this parchment appeared, inserted between the pages of a 15th century copy of the Tartar relation. Could this be the vestige of a medieval chart preserved in monastic libraries, its origins reaching back to Norse explorers or their informants? Mainstream scholarship has approached the map with cautious rigor. Radiocarbon dating of the vellum situates it firmly in the early to mid-15th century, and paleographic analysis of the script aligns with known scribal hands of that era. Yet when chemists examined the map's ink, they detected traces of anatase, a modern form of titanium dioxide used as a whitening agent in inks only after the 1920s. Subsequent spectroscopic studies confirmed that the pigment composition does not match medieval recipes. For many experts, these findings point to a 20th century forgery, painstakingly crafted on an old folio to lend it false antiquity. Yet the debate is far from settled. Defenders of the map's authenticity argue that anatase can occur naturally in certain medieval materials, and that contamination during storage might account for its presence. They point to the map's accurate depiction of Newfoundland's outline, an island shape unknown to European cartographers until the voyages of John Cabot in 1497, and suggest that Norse voyages left more detailed knowledge than the saga's alone record. Could the map represent a rare surviving charter of Norse seafarers, their chart later copied by a 15th century monk who inherited a now-lost scroll? As we study the Vinland coast, intriguingly rendered with bays, rivers, and islands, questions multiply. Why is the Labrador and Gulf of St. Lawrence region given such prominence, while more familiar parts of North America are left blank? Does this selective mapping imply direct Norse reconnaissance, perhaps trading visits to Beothuk or Micmac settlements, yielding geographic intelligence long before Columbus's crossing? Or did renowned mapmakers in Venice or Majorca simply adapt hearsay from travelers, weaving rumor into their Portolan charts? Speculative theories press beyond academic boundaries. A handful of voices propose that the Vinland Map was part of a trade network linking Atlantic ports, where Norse, Breton, and Iberian mariners exchanged charts and logs. In this view, the map embodies a fusion of Viking sagas and Mediterranean cartographic schools, its inked lines tracing routes known to few, but cherished by many. Some even argue that Portuguese fishermen, operating off Newfoundland's Grand Banks before Cabot, may have contributed corrections to a centuries-old Norse chart, adding coastal details to a map originally compiled in Icelandic workshops. More fringe interpretations invite us into the realm of conspiracy. Could the map have been forged by a clandestine society of antiquaries eager to bolster nationalist narratives, proving British claims to American lands centuries before Columbus? Or was it the work of a single obsessive collector in the early 20th century, armed with chemical knowledge and medieval manuscripts, seeking to place a prize in his personal library? Such theories hint at human ambition and inventiveness, but they rest on conjecture rather than proof. Turning our attention back to the manuscript's vellum, we see faint watermarks and chain line impressions indicating a European origin, perhaps French or Italian. The map's cartouches and Gothic legends bear stylistic parallels to maps of Gabriel de Valseca and the Venetian Giacomo Gastaldi. Yet the Vinland map differs in tone. Its simplicity contrasts with the decorative beasts and compass roses that adorn contemporary portolans. Was it intended as a utilitarian pilot chart, its maker relying on function over form? Recent digital reconstructions have overlaid the Vinland coastline onto satellite imagery, revealing both striking correspondences and curious distortions. The Bay of Fundy appears elongated. The St. Lawrence estuary is compressed. These inaccuracies could reflect the limitations of early surveying techniques, dead reckoning under sail, compass bearings sketched on parchment. Or they might betray a forger's imperfect knowledge of North American geography, imported from late 19th century guidebooks. As the library's soft lights dim and security glides by, the Vinland map remains an enigma suspended between centuries. It is at once a tantalizing hint, that medieval explorers charted American shores long before Cortez sailed beyond the horizon, and a cautionary emblem of how easily the past can be reimagined through forged artifacts. The map's true origins may lie in a dusty scriptorium, a forger's workshop, or even an undiscovered Norse cartographer's cabin. And so, as we close the glass case and step back into the hush of the reading room, we carry with us the map's unspoken question. Did someone, somewhere in the medieval world, chart the American coast with first-hand knowledge? Or are we witnessing the ingenuity of a modern mind, intent on reshaping history? Until new evidence emerges, be it a corroborating Norse inscription or an undisputed contemporaneous reference, the Vinland Map will continue to hover on the edge of legend and scholarship, inviting us to wonder what other cartographic ghosts lie hidden in the archives of time. As the silent stone of medieval Strasbourg recedes into memory, our journey turns to a summer that pulsed with an irresistible, inexplicable rhythm. July of 1518, when the streets of Upper Alsace became the stage for a convulsive dance that would etch itself into history. Picture a narrow lane off the Grande Ile, its half-timbered houses swaying under a heat-hazed sky. From one of those windows stepped Frau Trophea, her feet tapping a staccato beat against the cobblestones. At first, her neighbors thought it a fevered jig, a private relief from the stifling summer air. But as hours bled into days, her steps grew more frantic, her limbs more contorted, and then others joined, until dozens of townsfolk were swept into the same merciless cadence. Contemporary chronicles, municipal records, and the notes of city physicians describe the phenomenon with a sober bewilderment. Within a week, nearly 30 people danced without rest, their bodies racked by cramps and exhaustion. By the end of the month, that number had swelled into the hundreds. Some collapsed from sheer weariness. A few, overcome by stroke or heart failure, never rose again. Magistrates, desperate to halt the spectacle, erected stages to channel the dancers' energy and hired musicians to play, believing that if they provided music and sustenance, the afflicted might dance it out of their systems. Yet the plague persisted, a grim testament to forces beyond mere mortal control. Mainstream historians point to a convergence of stressors that might have loosened the reins of reason. Years of crop failures and famine had left the region haunted by hunger. Outbreaks of disease stalked the narrow alleys, and the specter of pilgrimage-related maladies, St. Vitus's dance, as some called choreomania, lent a moralizing veneer that blamed divine wrath for mortal suffering. Under such strain, collective psychogenic illness could readily take root, an individual's involuntary movements, mirrored by anxious onlookers, spreading like an electric current through gathered crowds. Mass hysteria, fueled by fear and suggestion, might explain how ordinary citizens found themselves compelled to dance in the noonday sun. Yet the dancing plague resists easy medicalization. Some chroniclers observed that the afflicted seemed impervious to fatigue, slipping into trance-like states where neither food nor water restored them. Did ergot poisoning, ingested through rye bread contaminated with claviceps purpurea, play a part? Hallucinogenic alkaloids can induce convulsions and delirium, but the toxin's effects usually manifest with nausea and gangrene, symptoms notably absent from the Strasbourg records. Could a milder fungal agent or a regional herbal remedy gone awry have triggered tremors that resembled a fevered dance? Other explanations venture beyond the physiological. A handful of scholars propose that the dancing was ritual atonement, born of medieval beliefs that physical affliction could cleanse communities of sin. In this view, the dancers became living scapegoats, their gyrations propitiating unseen deities or expiating collective guilt. Did processions of penitents once wind their way through cobbled streets, feet echoing on stone as they enacted a communal plea for mercy? If so, was the 1518 plague The culmination of forgotten rites resurfacing in desperation? Speculative theories turn even more curious. Some suggest that the dancers were gripped by a rare form of Tourette's-like disorder, precipitated by mineral deficiencies from famine, an organic tremor mistaken for mania. Others invoke astrological alignments, Jupiter's conjunction with Mars, stirring martial energies in the human frame, danced them from one seizure to the next. And in the wilder realms of conjecture, a few have imagined invisible cords tugging at mortal limbs, a poltergeist-driven ballet in which unseen spirits coaxed human vessels to move without rest. Despite decades of archival research, the primary sources offer no definitive diagnosis. Physicians of the era noted that the dancing began without prodrome, a sudden eruption of motion unlinked to fever or plague. The city council's minutes detail how town gates were locked to contain the dancers, yet no record survives of an edict explaining the ultimate cure. By autumn, the plague simply subsided, as abruptly as it had arrived, leaving survivors to nurse aching muscles and haunted memories. Archaeological surveys of the old town center have yielded fragments of musicians' instruments, broken lute strings, a cast bronze bell, tantalizing reminders of the official attempt to manage the outbreak through sound. But no mass graves mark a misstep in the dancers' final cadence. No chapel bears a dedicatory plaque to those whose hearts gave out mid-step. The absence of physical markers deepens the mystery, underscoring how a communal calamity can leave only the faintest echo in stone and parchment. Today, as we trace the route from the matte-finished houses to the spired cathedral, the air is calm, the streets silent. Yet beneath the mundane rhythms of modern life, the refrain of 1518 lingers, a reminder that bodies, like instruments, can sometimes play notes beyond our tuning. What interplay of mind, body, and belief drove those strangers into involuntary communion? Which unspoken narratives of hunger, fear, or faith pulsed beneath their skin, guiding every footfall? And in our own age of mass media and viral contagions, what forms might a modern dance plague take, silent or unseen? As dusk settles on Strasbourg's rooftops, the memory of that summer dance beckons us to wonder how much of our own behavior is choreographed by unseen currents. And so we leave those empty lanes behind, our footsteps echoing where once the compulsive beat held sway, carrying with us a question that remains unanswerable. When the next inexplicable rhythm seizes a crowd, will we recognize its tune before it compels us to join the dance? As the last echoes of Strasbourg's fevered dance fade into memory, our journey sweeps eastward across continents, to the sprawling taiga of Siberia, where a silent scar cuts through miles of evergreen forest. It was the morning of June 30th, 1908, when witnesses near the Podkamanaya Tunguska River spoke of a dazzling column of bluish light that cleaved the sky like a blade. Birdsong hushed. Windows rattled. Moments later, a thunderous roar rolled across the horizon, flattening some 80 million trees in a radial sweep over 2,000 square kilometers. The forest lay splayed like matchsticks, each trunk pointing away from a hidden epicenter no crater ever marked. Local Evenki hunters described the blast as two strong thunderclaps in quick succession, felt hundreds of kilometers away. In nearby villages, doors flew from hinges and utensils leaped from tables. Railway workers saw a pall of dust rising in the distance, blotting out the sun. Yet when expeditionary scientists first reached the site in 1927, they found no impact crater, no shattered meteorite fragments, only a warped, scorched wilderness where vegetation struggled to reclaim the fallen giants. Mainstream geology and astrophysics converge on one explanation. A stony asteroid or comet fragment, roughly 50 to 100 meters across, plunged into Earth's atmosphere at immense velocity, detonating in an airburst, roughly 5 to 15 kilometers above the ground. The fireball's heat and overpressure ripped apart the incoming body, releasing energy equivalent to 10 to 15 megatons of TNT, hundreds of times more powerful than the atomic bombs dropped 4 decades later. Seismic stations in Europe recorded the shockwave, while atmospheric pressure gauges in Asia registered the blast's passage around the globe. Yet the absence of an impact crater remains the Luftihaus of the taiga, an expected mark that no one can find. Still, each season's thaw yields fresh clues. Core samples of swamp peat show unusual levels of silica and iron, remnants of vaporized rock raining downward. Tree rings from specimens far beyond the blast zone bear chemical anomalies, spikes in carbon-14 and beryllium-10, consistent with sudden exposure to extraterrestrial radiation. Eyewitness accounts describe a pillar of fire followed by hardly breathing air, as if the blast momentarily emptied lungs of oxygen. Each data point reinforces the airburst model, yet the precise nature of the incoming object, asteroid or icy comet, remains under debate. Venturing beyond the consensus, more speculative theories take shape. Some researchers have proposed that a fragment of dense iron-nickel asteroid might have punched deeper into the atmosphere before exploding, accounting for localized pseudo-crater depressions found in swampy hollows. Others point to unverified reports of magnetic anomalies at the epicenter, suggesting a heavier-than-normal object that left hidden metallic shards deep underground. Could a future drilling campaign finally unearth the heart of that long-vanished mass? Pushing further into the fringe, a handful of voices invoke antimatter, or micro-black holes, arguing that only such exotic phenomena could explain the event's immense energy and craterless aftermath. In 2001, Louis Frank, an aerospace scientist, speculated that a minuscule black hole might have passed through Earth, its exit causing the shockwave we feel at Tunguska. The idea tantalizes the imagination. Yet no radiation signatures or gravitational disturbances from such a passage have been recorded in archival seismograms. Then there are the UFO enthusiasts, who claim that the blast was caused by a downed extraterrestrial craft or a failed experiment in Nikola Tesla's later years. According to these accounts, strange objects were spotted in the sky before the explosion, disc-shaped orbs that vanished as quickly as they appeared. The Tunguska site, they argue, was quarantined by Tsarist and later Soviet authorities to suppress evidence of non-terrestrial technology. But official correspondence released after the Soviet Union's collapse paints a different picture: a remote wilderness too rugged for immediate rescue, and a government wary of public panic more than alien conspiracies. Modern expeditions combine cutting-edge tools with local oral histories. LiDAR mapping peels back the forest canopy, revealing subtle depressions and uplifted ridges that hint at deep-seated shock effects. Drone surveys capture thermal anomalies in bogs where underground fires may still smolder, peat fires ignited by the blast's heat. And DNA analysis of soil microbes shows unusual stress markers, as if a once-in-a-millennium event disrupted ecosystems at the microbial level. Yet after more than a century of inquiry, the Tunguska Event retains an aura of unfinished business. What truly fell from the sky that summer morning? Was it a fragment of the asteroid belt, a wanderer from the outer solar system, or a comet's icy nucleus stripped by solar radiation? Did the object's composition, icy, metallic, or mixed, influence the altitude and manner of its detonation? Could hidden fragments still lie buried in permafrost, awaiting discovery by thawing layers? And what might they reveal about the frequency of such cosmic collisions in Earth's past, and our risk in the centuries to come? As the Siberian sun dips behind the larch and fir, the flattened forest stands as both monument and mystery. The taiga reclaims its broken limbs, hiding the blast's footprint beneath a carpet of green. Yet even as the living world heals, the memory of that pillar of fire endures in scientific journals and local legends alike. We leave Tunguska's ghostly axis behind, aware that some chapters of history unfold so swiftly they vanish before a crater can be dug, and that some mysteries, no matter how thoroughly examined, retain the power to surprise and to humble. As the last echoes of Siberia's fallen forest dissolve into memory, we turn our gaze southward, across the Aegean's glittering waters, to a low, unassuming hill near the modern village of Hellinikon in the Argolid. Here, amid scrubby olive groves and wild thyme, a terraced mound of roughly hewn limestone blocks rises like a book half buried in sand. From a distance, it resembles an earthwork or derelict foundation. Up close, the layers of stone, each course diminishing slightly in size, suggest a deliberate stacking, a silent whisper of a monument whose purpose has slipped beyond the reach of written history. Local tradition calls this structure a pyramid, a name that conjures images of Egypt's grand edifices. Early travelers in the 19th century sketched its angled sides and noted its alignment with the distant Taygetos Mountains. Johann Friedrich Landerer, a Bavarian geologist visiting in 1838, measured its base at roughly 80 by 60 meters, with a remaining height of just over 7 meters. He speculated that it might date to the age of the Argive kings, but offered no firm evidence. For nearly 2 centuries, the hill of Hellinikon has hovered between legend and archaeology, a whisper of ambition in a landscape already rich with Mycenaean palaces and Hellenistic theaters. Mainstream archaeologists have approached the site with caution. The prevailing view holds that the so-called pyramid is not a royal tomb on the scale of Mycenae's Tholos graves, nor is it part of the temple complexes that dotted the Argolid in the 4th century BC. Instead, they see a Hellenistic-era watchtower or fortified outpost, its tapered walls providing a strategic vantage over the fertile plain and the coastal routes to Epidaurus and Corinth. Ceramic sherds recovered from test trenches date to the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC, suggesting a utilitarian function, signaling beacon, refuge for shepherds, or way station for messengers. Its square plans and stepped courses, while reminiscent of pyramid geometry, may simply reflect the practicalities of working with irregular fieldstones on a modest budget. Yet the structure's precise alignment and unusually regular masonry invite further questions. Unlike rough Cyclopean walls of nearby Mycenaean forts, Hellenikon's stones bear clean edges and consistent dressing, techniques more demanding than simple field clearance. Was there a ritual aspect to its construction, a symbolic nod to earlier traditions of sacred hills cloaked in stone? Could the stepped form echo cultic platforms elsewhere in Greece, where terraces facilitated processions and offerings to chthonic deities? Stepping stones toward speculation lie in the structure's hidden corners. In 1937, the German archaeologist Wilhelm Dörpfeld noted a north-facing recess, an arc of carefully fitted blocks that might have sheltered a cult statue or marked a ritual niche. No inscriptions or votive fragments have been found, yet the niche's unexpected precision hints at a purpose beyond defense. Nearby, fragments of coarse, burnished pottery, unusual for military installations, suggest that feasting or ritual libations once accompanied visits to the hilltop. If Hellinikon served only as a beacon, why invest in spaces that evoke sanctuary rather than simply support? Modern surveys add fresh layers of intrigue. Drone-based photogrammetry reveals subtle alignments, sight lines extending from the pyramid's corners toward neighboring peaks and ancient roads. One line points directly to the tomb of King Mycenaeus at Dendera, another frames the rising sun at midsummer. Could ancient planners have tuned the structure to astronomical events, solstitial sunrise or the rising of key constellations, embedding timekeeping functions in stone? If so, the hill becomes not merely a vantage point, but a calendar, a monument to the cyclical rhythms of sky and soil. Venturing further into the realm of conjecture, a handful of researchers have proposed that the Hellinikon pyramid is a fragment of a pan-Mediterranean tradition of terraced sanctuaries. They draw parallels to the step pyramids of Egypt's Third Dynasty, Djoser's complex at Saqqara, and to Nubian examples at Gebel Barkal. Could Hellenistic travelers, inspired by Ptolemaic innovations in their allied Greek kingdoms, have imported pyramid-like forms as expressions of authority and divine favor? While no direct textual evidence links Hellinikon to Ptolemaic Egypt, the era's flourishing exchange of art and architecture across the Mediterranean makes such influences conceivable, if subtle. More fringe voices summon even older myths. Some suggest that Hellinikon guards the site of an Atlantean colony, its stone mound a remnant of a vanished civilization that once bridged continents. Others imagine that the pyramid supported an agora of philosophical schools, where students of Euclid and Archimedes debated the geometry of stepped forms under open sky. Though these ideas lack firm grounding, they underscore the structure's capacity to fuel the imagination. How few clues must survive for centuries of speculation to take root. Yet for all these theories, the hill of Hellinikon remains stubbornly mute. Systematic excavations have yet to penetrate the structure's deepest courses without risking collapse. Petrological analyses tie its stones to local quarries, no exotic imports here. Yet the decision to use dressed blocks rather than undressed rubble speaks to a conscious aesthetic. Each block's slight bevel creates joints that catch sunlight and shadow, animating the slope in subtle patterns as the day moves on. Was this play of light and shadow part of a ritual choreography, inviting observers to witness the hill come alive at dawn and dusk? As the sun dips behind olive-clad ridges and the hillside cools, the so-called pyramid stands silent, a testament to human craft and to questions unanswered. What drove Hellenistic settlers to raise this stepped mound where no royal tomb lay? Which rituals once echoed within its recesses, and which messages flickered in beacon fires kindled on its summit? And how many other modest monuments, half forgotten on remote hillsides, hold keys to architectural experiments we have yet to imagine? We leave the limestone terraces to their gathering shadows, aware that Hellinikon's true story remains as much in the stones we cannot lift as in those we can trace. The hill beckons us back, to probe its corners, to chart its alignments, and to listen for whispers that have eluded us for more than 2 millennia. For in every layer of mortar and every angled face lies the promise of discovery, and the quiet reminder that history's deepest mysteries often repose in the most unassuming places. As the limestone tiers of Hellinikon's terraced mound recede behind us, our journey now sweeps across the steppes and high plateaus of Eurasia, to a realm once inked on early modern maps as Great Tartary. Spread before us is a vast, half-forgotten landscape. From the snows of Siberia to the deserts of Central Asia, Europeans labeled this region Tartaria, a catch-all name for unknown peoples and places. Yet, as the tides of empire rose and cartographers refined their surveys, the map's blank spaces filled in, and Great Tartary vanished, its borders erased almost as swiftly as they had appeared. Open an atlas from the 17th century, and you'll find Tartaria sprawling across half a continent, mountain ranges drawn in hacheured strokes, rivers flowing into seas unnamed, cities marked with cryptic symbols. Jesuit missionaries described Buddhist monasteries perched on Tibetan peaks. Russian explorers mapped the Golden Horde territories. Chinese gazetteers recorded tribes whose names dissolved when transcribed by Western tongues. Over time, as Imperial Russia and Qing China asserted control, their surveys imposed new names: Siberia, Xinjiang, pushing Tartaria into cartographic oblivion. Was this simply the progress of geographic knowledge, or did a deeper erasure take place? Mainstream historians trace the decline of the term to evolving map-making conventions. As knowledge of Central Asia improved, European geographers replaced generic regions with politically defined provinces. The once mythic Tartars became identifiable groups: the Kazakhs, the Uzbeks, the Yakuts. By the 19th century, Tartary stubbornly lingered only in outdated gazetteers, its name a relic of earlier centuries' ignorance. No grand conspiracy was required, only the steady advance of diplomacy, colonization, and exploration. Yet the absence of Tartaria in modern atlases has inspired a counter-narrative, that of a lost civilization, advanced and far-flung, whose achievements were deliberately buried by victors eager to rewrite history. Proponents point to architectural marvels, ornate bathhouses, grid-patterned streets, vast fortresses in cities like Kazan and Khiva, arguing that these Victorian-style stone structures could not have been built by illiterate nomads. Did a global empire once extend from Eastern Europe to China, only to be swept away by cataclysmic mud floods or deliberate demolition? Speculative accounts often invoke accounts of sudden inundations recorded in local folklore, villages engulfed by rising waters, entire buildings buried beneath layers of silt overnight. They cite floor-level windows found half-submerged in earth, sunken facades revealed during modern excavations. Yet geological surveys attribute these layers to natural alluvial deposits from riverine floods over centuries. Could the floods have been orchestrated? Dam breaches or engineered deluges intended to collapse cities and conceal records? Or do these stories simply echo the rhythms of rivers that flood unpredictably in spring thaw? Another thread of theory centers on free energy devices, overwhelmingly described in 19th century patents and monkish manuscripts, said to have been commonplace in Tartarian workshops. These inventions, often based on perpetual motion or ether-driven principles, vanished after the World's Fairs of Vienna and Chicago, their blueprints destroyed or hidden. While no authenticated Tartarian schematics exist, period patent archives do record experiments in magnetism and electrostatics. Could an advanced energy technology have been suppressed by emerging fossil fuel interests, its pioneers labeled mad or occult to discredit their work? Fringe narratives also draw upon anomalous cartographic features. Island chains labeled Isles of the Blessed off Siberia's coast, inland seas that disappeared in later editions, and mountain ranges whose names shifted mysteriously. Some point to the 1502 Waldseemüller map, where a landmass west of Greenland appears partially inscribed with obscure glyphs. Might these be vestiges of Tartarian charts, copied by early explorers but later expunged as errors? Yet closer study shows these features often stem from navigation imprecisions, a miscalculated longitude here, an unverified seafarer's report there. Material evidence for a unified Tartarian civilization remains elusive. No central capital has been identified, no royal tombs unearthed, no continuous script found covering thousands of miles. What survives instead are mosaic fragments in Khiva, ornate minarets in Bukhara, and the faded frescoes of Buddhist caves at Kizil, each testament to local dynasties, not a single empire. Could these diverse cultures once have been provinces of a larger realm, sharing architectural guilds and ceremonial styles? Or do their similarities reflect parallel developments among societies interacting through trade along the Silk Road? Archaeological teams have surveyed palace ruins in the Altai foothills and examined subterranean water channels in the Tarim Basin. Petroglyphs of strange beasts and celestial symbols appear across deserts and cliffs, yet their meanings elude translation. Are they mythic creatures of shamanic cosmologies, or encoded records of astronomical observations, merely misread by modern eyes? Without a decipherable script or coherent material culture, the idea of a monolithic Tartarian state remains an alluring mirage rather than proven history. As the sun sets behind the steppes' distant horizon, the emptiness of erased maps feels strangely palpable. In museums from Ulaanbaatar to Moscow, curators display embroidered robes and jade relics, tangible traces of nomadic and settled peoples. Yet the notion of a Great Tartary resonates in the spaces between exhibits, where absence becomes a narrative and blank map regions invite us to project our desires for lost utopias. Standing on a windswept plain once called Tartary, we confront the interplay of knowledge and forgetting. Did centuries of cartography leave no room for grand conspiracy, only the steady realignment of place names and borders? Or does the very erasure of Tartaria suggest a deeper human impulse to consign entire worlds to oblivion when they no longer serve our maps and museums? The vanished empire of Tartary, whether geographic placeholder or suppressed civilization, reminds us that history is as much about what we choose to remember as what we forget. And so we leave the steppe behind, our footsteps echoing in the dust, carrying with us an open question. When the next blank expanse of our understanding beckons, will we resist the urge to fill it with fantasies of perfect worlds, or embrace the mystery of what truly lies beyond the edge of the known?